The palace of dust and whispers rose out of Korth like the bones of some dead god. Daenerys Targaryen stood before its yawning gate in a robe light enough for the desert heat and heavy enough to remind her of every name men had pressed onto her shoulders. Khaleesi, mother of dragons, the last Targaryen. She felt none of them fit. They hung from her like stolen jewels that had not yet warmed to her skin. Beyond the tall, narrow arch, the House of the Undying waited. The walls were a sickly blue, stone stained by centuries of shade of the evening. The air was sweet and rotten at once. Drogon hissed softly on her shoulder, smoke curling from his nostrils. Rhaegal and Viserion clung to her other side, scales rasping against silk, their tiny claws biting through to her skin as if afraid they might lose her in the murk. "You do not need to go inside," Ser Jorah murmured behind her. His voice carried the rasp of sand and too many disappointments. "We can leave this city tomorrow. Find a ship, sail east to the Jade Sea or west to..." "West," she said. The word was a taste on her tongue. Iron and snow and something distant, like a song half remembered. "I need answers before I cross the world." Pyat Pri bowed, pale as milk, his blue lips slick with the drink that had stained his very veins. "The Undying Ones wait eagerly, Khaleesi. All truths are given within. All paths laid bare. All paths." She did not know why that troubled her. Had she not longed for a straight road all her life? From the salt-stained tiles of Bravos to Bravos no more. From the man with the moist, heavy hands to a tent of red silk with a warrior and his Khalasar. From there to this city of carved shadows. Her life had never been a path, only a series of doors slammed behind her. She stepped forward anyway. The first sip of shade of the evening was like swallowing ink. It clung to her tongue and throat, thick and bitter, then bloomed into sweetness. Plums and honey and some flower that never grew in this part of the world. The second sip brought the world into sharper relief. The third turned the air to rippling glass. The blue brick gate seemed to open of its own accord. Inside, the air was cooler. Shadows clung like spiderwebs across the high ceiling. The corridor ahead was long and straight, a throat leading deeper into the palace's belly. Remember, the warlock had told her, always take the first door on the right. Her bare feet made no sound on the tiles as she walked. The dragon's claws did. Tap scratch, tap scratch. They were restless, wings twitching, eyes a molten mirror of the faint light. She passed the first archway on her left. It led into darkness so complete it swallowed the very idea of light. She kept her eyes fixed ahead. The first door on the right swam into focus, half seen through a haze, but real enough. It was of plain wood, unpainted. A door such as might close off a storeroom in any mean inn. She reached for the handle. Something moved in the corner of her eye. Another door that had not been there before. Narrow, tall, its panels carved with swirling waves. Set at its center was a small red rectangle, a painted door in miniature. It was the color of a sunset she remembered from Bravos, leaning out a high window to see the water burn. A child's longing rose in her without warning. The house with the red door. Lemon trees and laughter on the street below. A home that had never truly been hers, though she had worn grooves in her heart thinking of it. She should take the first door on the right. The painted red rectangle seemed to pulse with its own heartbeat. "Just a look," she whispered. Her voice came back to her from the far end of the hall, stretched and distorted. "Only a look." She turned her hand, fingers sliding from the plain door's cool iron ring to the carved frame of the other. It was warm beneath her touch, as if a sun shone on the far side. A breeze carried the scent of lemons and fresh bread through the cracks. She stepped through. The light blinded her. When her vision cleared, she was standing on cobbles slick from a morning rain. The sound of gulls wheeling overhead, their cries sharp and distant. A canal ran to her right, narrow boats gliding past, men with poles pushing them along. Colorful awnings drooped from windows. A little garden sat behind a wall of pale stone, and over the wall rose the slender trunk of a lemon tree, its leaves trembling in the breeze. She knew this street. Knew the tilt of the eaves, the crack in the plaster where she had once traced a shape with a dirty finger. The house with the red door stood before her. Its paint was fading at the edges, peeled back to show the dark wood beneath. But it was still red, still the exact shade her memory had hoarded. The knocker was a lion's head, as it had always been. Her heart hammered as if it wanted to leap from her chest and pound upon the wood itself. This is not real, she thought. This is one of their tricks. An illusion. A lie. Yet the cobbles were wet and cold under her bare feet. Her robe clung damp to her legs. When she lifted a hand to the door, her fingers trembled. The lion's head was cool metal beneath her touch. The door opened from within. The woman who stood there was older than Daenerys remembered. But that hardly mattered. Her face was kind, lined in ways the girl she had been had never seen. Her hair, once dark, now shot through with silver, was tied back with a strip of faded blue cloth. "Dany," the woman said, and her voice broke on the name. "You're late. I was beginning to worry." Daenerys could not speak. The woman reached out, cupping her cheek in a hand that smelled of flour and lemon peel. Well, come inside. You'll catch your death standing out there in the damp." Aye? The warmth of the house enveloped her like a cloak. The walls were whitewashed. Baskets hung from ceiling hooks filled with onions, garlic, small cured fish. The air was full of the scent of baking bread, of stew simmering on the hearth. She had dreamed this place so often she could walk it blind. Yet there was a small scar on the table she did not remember, a nick in the plaster by the stairs. New things. This was not the dusty picture in her mind. It was alive. How? She meant to ask how I came here, what price was paid, which magic bent the world to place me back in this dream. Instead, what came out was... "I'm sorry I'm late." The woman's eyes softened. "You're always running off to the docks to gape at the ships. You think I don't know? Go. Sit. Eat. Then you can tell me all about the dragons you saw this time." Dragons. The word vibrated through her. She felt the empty weight of her shoulders. Drogon, Rhaegal, Viserion. Gone, as if they had never existed. Her neck felt naked and cold. "This is wrong." It was only the one, she lied, sitting at the table because her legs would not hold her otherwise. "Black as night." "Black." The woman chuckled. "Then you've seen the same one as everyone else. All the sailors talk about him now, the storm dragon they're calling him. They say he belongs to a queen across the narrow sea, a widow with silver hair who rides him like the wind and leaves fire in her wake." Daenerys' skin prickled. "Across the sea? That's what they say." The woman turned back to the hearth. "Don't fill your head with such stories. Queens and dragons are for songs. We have enough to worry about here with prices going up and the Sea Lord's men arguing over taxes." "Me, young cow." Daenerys stared at her hands. They were the hands of a girl. No calluses from reins and sword hilts, no scars from rope burns or dragon teeth. A faint ink stain by her thumb. She turned them over, as if she might find answers in the lines of her palms. "What is it, Dany?" She did not know how to answer. Her memories were a broken mosaic. She remembered a tent and a burnt husk of a man, a child's life paid in part for 3 dragon eggs to crack open in a pyre. She remembered riding at the head of a khalasar, the wind ripping tears from her eyes. She remembered her brother's hand around her arm, hard enough to bruise, his spittle on her face as he called her names. Yet those memories felt distant, muffled, as if heard through a wall. This kitchen, this table, the soft thud of a knife as the woman chopped carrots, those were sharp and close. What happened to Viserys? The question slipped out, strange on her tongue. The woman's knife paused. "Your brother is in Tyrosh with the rest of them," she said at last. "You know that." "The rest of them?" "Your father's cousins, the ones who still think they can win back a throne long lost. Let them chase ghosts if they like. I'm glad you have more sense than that." Daenerys swallowed. In some other crack of the world, her brother had led her by the hand from city to city, selling their mother's jewels, trading on a name that once made kings kneel. In that life, he had died with molten gold on his skull, crowned and killed in the same breath. Here he lived, it seemed, far away and as foolish as ever. Here she had chosen differently, or someone had chosen for her. "I'm glad too," she heard herself say. Yet that night, as she lay on a pallet in the little room overlooking the garden, staring at the cracked plaster above, she thought of the tales the woman had spoken of. A queen in the east, a storm dragon, ships whispering of cities burned and chains broken. "All truths are given within," Pyat Pri had said. "All paths laid bare." If she was not that queen, someone else was. The thought left a hollow ache under her breastbone. Time moved strangely in the House of the Undying. Days stacked on days until they became weeks, months. She went to market with the woman, learned the rhythms of the canal tides, the faces of the regular fishmongers. She watched boys her own age learn to handle oars and knives. Men at taverns muttered of war in Westeros, of a boy king and his brothers, of wolves and lions tearing each other to pieces. From time to time, a snatch of song would drift across the water from a passing ship. She caught her own name once, twisted by a singer's tongue, wrapped in myth. Silver-haired queen from the fire's bright door. Storm-crowned mother the world waits for. The words pierced her like tiny knives. She walked the streets of Bravos with a ghost seated at the back of her skull. The ghost knew how to ride horses and sleep on the hard ground beneath the open sky. It knew the feel of a dragon's wing beats through her bones when she clamped her knees around scaled shoulders and soared. It knew how to look at slave chains and see not inevitability, but something that could be broken. But this life had been built on a different choice, or lack of one. In this path, some twist of fate had left her in that red-doored house, safe and small and ordinary. The world beyond did not care. News came more often now. Refugees from Westeros, thin-faced men and hollow-eyed women who had sold everything to buy passage, filled the cheaper inns. They brought stories of a long winter that would not end, of dead men walking with ice in their eyes, of lightless nights in which whole villages vanished. "They say dragons came back too late," one man croaked in a tavern where Daenerys sat with a jug of sour wine between her hands. Her and her beasts burned kings landing to black glass, they say. But the snow kept falling anyway. And when the white things marched, fire or no fire, there were too many of them. A story. Someone scoffed, but without much heat. "What became of the queen?" asked another, half mocking, half reverent. "The fire maid astride her black monster?" "Killed," the refugee said. "By one of her own, that's the way it's told. A man she loved. I heard it in Lys, again in Pentos, and once more in Volantis. They all put different names on him, but it's the same tale every time. He buried a sword in her heart as the city burned around them, and the dragon's screams split the sky." Him. Daenerys' throat tightened. Her hand shook. A slosh of wine spilled over the lip of the cup, staining her fingers red. "Serves her right," muttered a dockworker. Mad she was. Mad as the rest of them. Took her long enough to show it. Mad? The word came out of Dany's mouth before she could stop it. She freed slaves. She broke chains. Interest turned toward her like a room full of knives. "And how would you know what she did, little fish?" someone sneered. She stammered something and fled into the rain, the wind cutting through her thin cloak. Down by the canal, she leaned against the stone and pressed her forehead to it, the cold biting into her skull. Her breath came ragged. She could see it, see herself, on that other road. Her hand raised, sunlight blazing off dragonfire as it poured into a city. Bells tolling, or drowned. A man's face before her, eyes full of love and horror both. A sword glinting in his grip. All truths are given within. She did not know how long she stood there. When she finally pushed herself away from the wall and turned, the alley was wrong. Too narrow. The buildings leaned at impossible angles, their upper stories almost touching above her head. The air tasted of ash and bitter fruit. The red door was in front of her again. Its lion's head knocker grinned, teeth catching a strange, sour light. Her heart lurched. She reached for the handle, not with longing this time, but with a kind of exhausted resignation. The door opened onto darkness. She stepped through and fell into heat and the roar of a city. The sky above was low and white, thick with a haze that blurred its edges. The air stank of smoke, shit, and a faint metallic tang of blood. She stood in a plaza ringed with pyramids, the central one looming like a mountain, topped by a bronze harpy wreathed in chains. Marine. Her dress was a simple one, white linen patterned with a pale blue fringe, the fashion she had decreed after tearing down the harpy standards. Bracelets of hammered gold circled her arms. The dragon-shaped torque at her throat was warm against her skin. This path fit like clothes she had worn long enough to forget the time before. "Your Grace," Missandei's voice at her shoulder, clear and careful. "The great masters await you in the throne room, and the petitioners." Of course they did. They were always waiting. Daenerys turned. Drogon was not here. He had flown, wild and difficult, only darting down to snatch goats and children when it pleased him. Rhaegal and Viserion crouched chained in the darkness beneath the pyramid, their eyes burning with hurt confusion whenever she descended with bloody meat. She had hardened her heart to it because she thought she must. She walked into the pyramid through long halls lined with carved stone, past Unsullied who stood like gray statues. The throne room was a long, echoing space, the harpy's head removed to make way for her own seat. A patched-together thing of wood and bronze, too small, too new, always feeling temporary. A line of Marines waited below the dais. At their head, a girl no older than 9 held the hand of a woman with stooped shoulders. "Your Grace," the girl said when Missandei had announced her. Her high Valyrian was rough, but earnest. "My brother, he was taken by the sons of the Harpy, they say." Her voice trembled. "They say you cannot keep us safe." The cry rose, not from one throat but from many. A murmur, a tide of frustration. Daenerys felt it every day now, the weight of a city that would not bend as easily as chains snapping under Dragonflame had. Old houses schemed in shadow. The Yunkish gathered outside her walls. Her own freedmen chafed under rules they did not understand. "I am doing all I can," Daenerys said. Her voice filled the hall, but she heard its thinness. "I have outlawed the fighting pits, forbidden the sale of flesh. I have outlawed our bread," hissed one of the freedmen. "I was a fighter. That was how I fed my sons. Now what do we eat, Dragon Queen?" A nobleman stepped forward with a mocking bow. "You have forbidden your enemies their gold as well, magnificence. A curious way to win peace." Her temper flared, quick as kindling. "Is peace what you call it when men die screaming for sport?" And so the arguments spilled on, day after day. She married Hizdar Zolorak to stop the killings. She reopened the pits she hated. She ate poisoned locusts in her nightmares and avoided them in truth. She tried leniency, and she tried terror. She rode Rhaegal and Viserion in her dreams, but each morning woke to the rattle of their chains. Meereen did not love her. It tolerated her when she bled for it. Outside the city, the Yunkish grew bolder. They ringed her walls with siege engines and sellswords. Plague crept through their camps, the bloody flux leaving brown stains on their banners. It seeped into the city through rats and refugees. She held on. The dragons grew restless in their pit. Heat shimmered off their scales when she visited. Alone but for a handful of Unsullied. They huffed smoke into her face. Their eyes slitted to furious gold. "I will free you," she promised them. "When the city is ready. When I can trust you not to burn it for spite." They did not understand patience. When the day came, the city burned anyway. It started with torches thrown into warehouses down by the docks. Men in harpy masks hacked at Unsullied patrols. Freedmen and old masters collided in the streets. Yunkish Siga engines began their slow, deadly work, stones hammering into the outer walls. Some broke, some did not. Daenerys tried to put out fires with buckets and orders. She rode through the city with her Khalasar remnants at her back, her white mare dancing under her. She screamed commands until her voice broke. The heat grew suffocating. A stone from the enemy camp struck part of the pyramid, sending a rain of dust through the throne room. A tremor shook the whole structure. Somewhere beneath her feet, she heard the shuddering groan of chains. "Your Grace." Grey Worm burst into the hall, his face pale under the bronze of his skin. Smoke clung to him. The dragons. She ran. The stairway down into the darkness under the pyramid was choked with dust. Torchlight wavered, making the walls sweat with shadow. The stench hit her first. Scorched stone, singed flesh, the hot iron tang of blood. Rhaegal burst from the gloom before she reached the bottom. His wings hammered against the narrow passage, tearing chunks from the walls. One chain trailed from his neck, links bent and twisted. His roar rattled her teeth. "Rhaegal!" She reached for him as she had when he was hatchling small, when his head could fit in her cupped hands. He snapped past her, jaws closing on empty air where men had stood moments before. Their screams echoed up the stair as he clawed his way toward the light, toward the city. Viserion followed, his pale wings throwing back the torchlight in blinding flashes. He was bleeding from a wound along his flank where the chain had dug deep. Someone had tried to hold him and failed. He tore free of the last links with a wrench that sent sparks flying. "Wait!" Daenerys cried. "Please." "I will." They did not wait. They exploded out into the plaza like lightning, wings snapping open. People scattered, mere scuttling dots from this vantage, some too slow. Flame washed across stone. The bronze harpy melted and screamed as it fell. Daenerys scrambled up after them, choking on smoke. She burst into the open and saw hell. Meereen was a furnace. Fire leapt from building to building. Men ran with their clothes aflame. Women clutched children and stumbled blindly. Above it all, her dragons screamed, wild with new freedom and old fury. They dived and wheeled, chasing each other through plumes of smoke, loose from every restraint. "This is what you feared," a voice whispered in her skull. "The price of keeping them chained. The price of letting them go." She remembered another city, a city she had never seen in this life but knew. Spires and red roofs, a great keep on a hill, a bell tower shuddering with sound as fire swept through streets. Bells or no bells, fire regardless. She could try to call the dragons back. She could mount her white mare, ride for the Yunkish lines, die in some desperate charge. Or she could try to save who she could. "Grey Worm," she said, voice raw. "Gather what unsullied are left. Open the gates on the north side. Get the people out, as many as will come. We will lead them to the river. And the city, Your Grace?" She looked at Meereen with its burning pyramids, at the banners she had ordered draped, the symbols she had tried to make her own. She thought of the girl with the missing brother, of the nobleman's mocking bow, of Hisdar's careful, calculating hands. "It is lost," she said. They led a river of people out under a rain of ash. By the time they reached the water, her voice was gone. Her white mare's flanks were spattered red. The sky over Meereen glowed like an oven door. Rhaegal and Viserion were distant shapes now, circling high above, fire trailing from their mouths, their roars reduced to dim thunder. "Where will we go?" a freedman asked her, clutching a child to his chest. "Where there is food," Daenerys croaked. "Where there is land to till, where the dead are buried and do not rise." He stared at her as if she were speaking some foreign tongue. That night, as she sat by the river with ash in her hair, she felt the world shift. The fire of Meereen's burning seemed to fold inward, collapsing into itself until it became a single point of light. That light became the moon hanging above the camp. The moon stretched, opening into an eye. She fell into it. The corridor of the House of the Undying rose around her, as if she had only just stepped through the door with the carved waves. Her lungs dragged in the scent of dust and bitter fruit. Her shoulders burned when she touched them. Her fingers came away sticky with dragon scratches that were not there a moment before. The plain door on the right waited, patient as stone. Behind her, the red-doored path had closed. Daenerys leaned against the cold wall, chest heaving. Her heart raced with the memory of smoke and screaming, of the weight of a life in Bravos where she had been small and safe and ordinary while another Daenerys burned cities, and men called her mad. Her eyes stung with Moraine's ashes. "You said all truths," she whispered into the dim blue air. "You did not say I would have to live them." 100 doors lined the hall now, where before there had been only 2. Each had its own color, its own carved sigil. A sunburst, a 3-headed dragon, a tree heavy with fruit, a broken wheel. One, set farther down, bore a relief of a man's face with wolf's eyes. Her hand rose toward it without thought. The corridor stretched and blurred. Her feet moved, though she did not remember the steps. Her palm met rough wood carved in the pattern of a direwolf's head, its jaws open in silent snarl. She stepped through. Snow swirled around her. The cold slapped her like a hand. The air was so sharp it burned her lungs. Her breath turned to mist. She stood atop a battlement of black stone, wind clawing at her hair, cloak snapping around her like wings. The wall loomed to her left, impossibly vast, its ice face catching a ghostly light. Torches bobbed along its top like fireflies. Below, in the yard of Castle Black, men moved like ants, their shouts torn and carried away by the wind. Jon Snow stood beside her. His hair was tied back from his face, dark curls crusted with frost. The cloak at his shoulders was thick black wool. Snow had settled in its folds. His sword hung at his hip. His eyes, when he turned them on her, were, as she remembered, earnest, haunted, full of things left unsaid. "Are you cold?" he asked. She should have been freezing. The silk dress she wore beneath her furs was too light for this place. Yet she did not shiver. The dragons had changed her. Fire lived in her bones. "No," she said. He nodded, turning his gaze back to the north. Beyond the wall, nothing moved. No flicker of torchlight, no hint of white shapes against the snow. Just darkness and the hint of distant hills. "They're waiting," Jon said. "Just as we are." "How much longer?" she asked. "Until they think the wind is in their favor. Until the dead grow tired of standing still." His mouth twisted in a humorless half-smile. "It will not be long." They had been here for weeks. She remembered. The march north from Winterfell. The uneasy alliance forged around a map table heavy with old grudges. The day she had flown over the wall, Drogon's shadow scraping across ice. The way the northern men had stared up, some with awe, some with fear. "We should have come sooner," she murmured. "We would have had fewer men." Jon's gloved hands curled around the stone of the battlement. His knuckles widened. "The lords in the south needed convincing. They believe in what they can see. They saw your dragons. They saw the dead man Beric brought to King's Landing." His jaw clenched when he spoke of that city. The memory of Cersei's smirk burned in them both. "They saw, and still some did not believe," Daenerys said. "They will if we win. They will if we burn. If we burn the dead." His eyes slid to her sharp. "Not the living." The accusation was soft, but it was there. Not spoken in this life, yet present in tales he had heard. Rumors of what dragons and their riders had done in the past. Stories of Harrenhal and Blackfire rebellions, of cities turned to cinders. "I am not my father," she said. "I know." He looked away. "That's why you're here." Below, a horn sounded. One long note, falling away into the wind. Then another. 3, in the old tales, meant others. In the stories they had all heard as children and dismissed as nursery fright. She had never thought to hear that call in truth. The third blast rolled over the wall like thunder. Men swarmed. The yard below turned to chaos. Shouts, the clang of metal, the creak of winches as the Night's Watch moved to the positions they had drilled for weeks. "Go," Jon said. Your place is with them, and yours." He laughed once, a harsh sound. "With them as well, but first I need to see something." "See what?" "If the gods are listening." He vaulted down from the battlement stairs without waiting for her answer. She watched him for a heartbeat, then whistled. Drogon's shadow passed over the yard a moment later. He had been perched along the ice face, claws sunk deep, wings furled to hide against the wall itself. Now he slid along its height like a great dark knife, then dropped into the yard with a bone-shaking impact. Men scattered. Some cheered, some cursed, a few fell to their knees. Daenerys descended to him, the snow melting wherever his hot breath touched. She laid a hand along his jaw. He rumbled, leaning into her touch. "We fly," she said into the warm curve of his neck. We do not burn until I say. You hear me, my love? You burn when I command and not before." His head swung, one baleful eye fixing her, then flicking to the wall and the darkness beyond. He understood war. The rest was harder. She mounted, the harness creaking under her weight. Wind knifed at her face as he sprang upward, beating his wings. Ghostly moonlight lit the ice below in soft blues. The world opened around them, a sheet of white stretching endlessly until it dissolved into the night. They crossed the wall's crest. At first she saw nothing. Then her eyes caught movement. A thin line along the horizon, darker even than the night beneath the moon. It rippled, bulged, flowed toward them. As it drew nearer, she saw the flicker of pale faces, the glint of moonlight off bones. An army, she thought, as vast as any king's in the history of this world, and as silent as a prayer spoken into a grave. At their head, atop a pale horse, rode a figure in armor that seemed carved of ice. Its eyes burned cold blue. The Night King, they called him. There were older names, whispered in fireside tales, but she did not know those. He lifted a spear of crystal, its point catching the moonlight in a shard of silver. "Now," a voice whispered in her ear. Roaring, distant, familiar and strange. "Now you choose. Burn him in one breath and win a war in a single act. Or hesitate and..." She did not hesitate. "Dracarys," she hissed. Fire burst from Drogon's throat in a torrent. The night exploded into gold and orange, so bright her eyes seared. The flames crashed down upon the silent army, washing over ranks of dead. Bones blackened and snapped. Frost cracked. Figures shrieked, a sound so high only her dragon seemed fully pleased by it. The fire rolled onward, a river down a hill, engulfing the rider at the head. For one heartbeat, the ice spear shone through the blaze. Then it melted, running down the haft like water, and the figure beneath it shattered, cracking apart into a storm of snow and cinders. The wind caught the explosion of cold and hurled it upward. Drogon reared, screaming, wings clawing at the air. Ice and fire collided around them. For a moment, the world narrowed to the pain of heat on her skin and cold in her bones. Then everything fell silent. Below, the dead wavered. One by one, in waves, they collapsed. A collective shudder ran through their ranks. Bodies toppled, armor clattering. Horses fell and did not rise. It was like watching a candle gutter in an unseen breeze. Daenerys wheeled Drogon higher, counting breaths. Each time one of the blue-eyed dead crumpled, something tugged at her, not at her flesh, but at something deeper. Some taut strand inside her that thrummed with every death. As if each soul severed from unnatural bondage pulled at her own. "Stop," she thought wildly, clutching at Drogon's neck. "Not at him, at whatever force was doing this. You will tear me in half." The wind did not listen. Far below, Jon Snow advanced with the first wave of men. Swords drawn, faces set. By the time they reached the place where the Night King had stood, there were only corpses on the ground. Real corpses now, not puppets. The flames from Drogon's breath licked across the snow, eating them. It was victory. It felt like defeat. When they landed back within Castle Black's walls, the men roared. Some wept openly. The Lord Commander of the Night's Watch fell to his knees. Sansa, wrapped in thick furs, stared with a look halfway between disbelief and desperate hope. "You did it," Jon said, staggering to her, snow in his hair, his face chapped red by the cold. "Gods, Dany, you did it in one blow." She opened her mouth to answer and tasted iron. Blood dribbled from her nose, hot in the freezing air. Her hands shook. Drogon's wings trembled where they folded against his sides. "Are you hurt?" Jon asked. She tried to say no, and coughed instead. Pain lanced through her chest. Every place the dragonfire had touched the dead, every place the magic binding them had broken, echoed inside her, a chorus of tearing strings. "Something is wrong," she whispered. "Jon, I think..." She fell. The world went sideways. The snow rushed up to meet her. She heard shouts, felt hands on her shoulders. Her head, someone tearing at her cloak. Drogon roared above, a sound of pure, wild grief. In the moment before darkness took her, she saw it. The threads that tied the dead to their unnatural master had been woven through something older, deeper. Magic did not end. It changed shape. When she burned the heart of winter, she tore at the loom itself. The world shuddered. In one path, she would live. In another, this act would unmake the dragons, steal the fire back from men, leave the world colder but safe. In a third, the power she broke would seep into new cracks, breeding horrors of a kind no one yet imagined. She had walked one of 1,000 roads. Her last breath left her in a cloud that turned the air to glass. When she gasped again, the air was thick and perfumed. She was back in the Blue Hall. The doors stretched before her, infinite now. Each bore a sigil, each held a scent, a temperature, a whisper of its future. She tasted them all in one dizzy sweep, the copper tang of a blade being driven into her heart by someone she loved. The salt sting of sea spray as she sailed away from war entirely. The sweetness of ripe figs in a garden in Pentos, where she had chosen to never be more than a wife and mother. The acrid smoke of King's Landing burning. The smell of horse sweat and grass as she led Dothraki over green Westeros hills in endless rain. It was too much. "Stop," she said. "Please, stop." The house did not obey. Something else did. A roar tore through the hall, familiar and wild. The walls shook. Dust fell from the ceiling in soft puffs. Beyond the doors, flames licked along their frames, fingers of orange and red. Drogon. In the true world, outside this maze of visions and futures, he was burning his way toward her. She remembered now. Pyat Pre's cold hand on her arm. The undying gathering like a circle of shriveled worms, their blue lips opening to croak about her, about the mother of dragons, about how they would drink her life and bind themselves to her flame. She had called for her child, and he had answered. Fire ate prophecy. Doors blackened and split. The carved symbols cracked. Heat rolled down the hall, bending the air. The distant end of the corridor disappeared in a wave of orange. The Undying screamed, voices like dry paper. "Wait," Daenerys said. Her voice cracked. "Please, I need..." She did not know what she needed. A map? A guide? A single clear answer in this sea of blood and ash. The chance to choose the one road that would save the most and damn the fewest? One door remained untouched near her hand. Its wood was smooth, uncarved, plain as the first she had meant to take. No sigil, no color, nothing to mark it from any other save its stubborn lack of adornment. She laid her palm against it. The wood was warm, not with the fever of building flames, but with something slower, steadier, like the heat of a living body. For a heartbeat, she saw nothing. No flicker of possible future, no flash of death or triumph, just darkness. Then, faintly, like ink seeping into water, images began to form. A road running not straight but crooked, full of bends and forks and improbabilities. Astapor's red bricks beneath her feet. Slaves' collars piled high and melted down into something new. A city of pyramids burning, yes, but also regrowing. Its stones carried to build different walls in different places. Ships flying her banner, not to rain fire on King's Landing, but to ferry grain from the south to the hungry in the north. Dragons perched not on keeps, but on wild, craggy cliffs. Untamed, and only half ruled by any hand. No single conquest, no single catastrophe. 1,000 small ones instead. Failures and victories woven so tightly neither could be pulled free without the rest unraveling. It was the path of no prophecy at all. The House of the Undying had shown her what happened when she gave herself wholly to any one vision. The home she cherished while the world froze without her. The city she tried to rule and lost to her own dragons. The king she loved who slew her for fear of a madness that might never have been. The army of dead she burned in one glorious act that ended magic itself. This door showed only uncertainty, only choice. She heard the Undying then, all their voices fused into one dry croak. Daughter of death, mother of dragons, slayer of worlds, you cannot flee what you are. I am not fleeing. Her hand tightened on the door. I am choosing. Fire crashed over her. It did not burn. It flowed around her in a wave of heat and light, swallowing the hall, the doors, the cracked blue bricks. She felt her dragons in it, Dragon above all, but the echo of Rhaegal's rumble, Viserion's thin keen. Their presence steadied her. She stepped forward. The plain door opened onto blazing light. She emerged into the ruined heart of the House of the Undying, coughing, her lungs filling with smoke. Around her, blackened shapes that had once been the Undying curled and shrank, their parchmented flesh cracking as it fell away. Drogon stood over her, wings mantled, jaws snapping at cinders. His eyes, red as coals, fixed on her with fierce relief. You, she whispered, reaching to stroke his snout. He nudged her with enough force to bruise. Outside, she could hear Jorah shouting her name hoarsely, others calling, the distant clamor of Korthine guards. The world beyond this palace still waited, ignorant of the paths she had walked in an eye blink. Braavos and its red door, Meereen in ash, the wall, and a falling shard of winter. King's Landing shattering under dragonfire. 100 paths of blood and glory and heartbreak, each real in the moment she lived them. Each gone now like smoke blown away by a stronger wind. She felt them in her like scars. Khaleesi, Jorah said, bursting through a curtain of fire at the broken arch. His hair was singed, his cloak smoldered. We have to go. She staggered to her feet. The palace around them collapsed, beams groaning, walls spitting chunks of hot plaster. Drogon lowered his body, making a shield of his wings. She ducked beneath them, grabbed Rhaegal and Viserion by their narrow bellies, where they clung hissing to a toppled column and ran. They burst into the sunlight as the House of the Undying gave up its last strength and fell behind them in a roar of dust and flame. The air outside was so bright it stabbed her eyes. For a moment she swayed, disoriented. The hubbub of Qarth seemed unreal after the hush and horror of the visions. Merchants shouting, water sellers crying their wares, the distant shriek of a peacock somewhere in a nobleman's garden. Someone pressed a goblet into her hand. Shade of the evening's aftertaste still coated her tongue, but this was only water. It ran down her throat like a blessing. Did you see them? Pyat Pri demanded, his face drawn, lips gone from blue to gray. Did the Undying speak? Did they show you the truths that... They are dead, she said. The warlock flinched as if struck. His eyes darted to the smoking ruins. Impossible. Nothing is impossible. Her voice was flat. Once she might have been shaken, clawing at him for explanations. Now the visions sat inside her like coals. She could reach for any of them and burn herself all over again if she was foolish enough. Some truths you're better rid of, she added. He spat something, a curse and a tongue that tasted of rot. He fled before her dragon's hissing. Ser Jorah hovered at her elbow as they made their way back toward Zaro Urahon Daxos' mansion. His concern pressed against her like a hand on her back. "What happened in there?" he asked at last. "You look as if you have not slept in a year." "I lived 1,000 lives," Daenerys said, "and died in most of them." He stared. She did not elaborate. That night, when the city had quieted and her handmaidens had withdrawn, she sat by the open window with Drogon curled in her lap. Rhaegal and Viserion twined together at her feet. Stars pricked the sky over Korth, their cold light indifferent. One by one, she held each path the house had shown her up to that starlight, examining it like a shard of glass. The red door and its safe smallness. The ash-choked streets of Marine. The roar of a city burning in the west. Joan's face as life left her in the snow. She could be all of them. She could be none. The world would push. Prophecies would whisper in her ear. Men would tell her who she was meant to be. Mad Queen, Savior, Breaker of Chains, Bringer of Doom. The Undying had believed they were revealing inevitabilities. That she would be caught in their web, snagged by one version of herself, and dragged along its thread to whatever end it held. But she had seen the plain door. She had walked a road of uncertainty and choice. She thought of Astapor, of the slave soldiers who stood like statues, their eyes dead, of the whip in Kresni's Monaclo's hand, of the words she might speak to turn that whip and their spears to her own use. In one path, she would take them and march east, conquering, never crossing the sea. In another, she would trade that power for ships to Westeros and wake old terrors with dragonfire. In a third, she would let them be, sail away, leaving thousands in chains and sleeping soundly in the belief that it was not hers to mend. No prophecy could tell her which of those was mercy and which was cruelty. Only she could. "Every choice is a war," she whispered into Drogon's warm neck. He flicked a wing. The leather's soft edge brushed her wrist. "Every road saves some and damns others." He did not answer. He was a dragon. His truths were simpler. Hunger, flight, warmth, the joy of burning. She envied him. Sleep came in snatches that night, full of shifting doors and lives that flickered and went out like candles. In one, she bore a son with Joan's eyes. In another, she died nameless in a gutter in Pentos, fever burning her up no matter how she begged the gods for another chance. In a third, she sat alone on the Iron Throne, all who had ever loved her dead or gone. The visions had no order now. They bled into one another, made nonsense. When dawn painted the sky over Korth in streaks of pink and gold, she rose. Her dragons clambered onto her shoulders as they always did, their weight as natural as her own hair. She dressed not in the diaphanous silks the Qartheen favored, but in riding leathers. She buckled on her whip. She bound her hair back in the Dothraki fashion, 3 small bells chiming at its end. In the hall, Ser Jorah waited with a question already forming on his tongue. "We go to Astapor," Daenerys said before he could voice it. His brows rose. "There are other cities, other routes. Zaro would counsel. Zaro would counsel whatever keeps me in his debt," she said. "Astapor first. Their slaves may be mine to free. Or not. I will see them and decide." No. She did not tell him that in one life she had bought the Unsullied for a dragon, and taken her first taste of true power from the sight of whips falling from slavers' hands. In another, she had walked away, and later heard of a revolt that drowned the city in its own blood. In yet another, she had hesitated too long, and the Yunkish had beaten her there, tightening their grip on the trade. This time would not be any of those lives. It would be its own. She could not promise herself that the path ahead held no catastrophes. She had seen too many futures now to believe any road was free of blood. Somewhere, some version of her had burned King's Landing to black glass. Somewhere else, some Daenerys had died at the wall, her fire taking winter with it. Somewhere, she had never hatched dragons at all, and the world spun on without them, perhaps calmer, perhaps simply poorer. But this Daenerys held their echoes without being bound to their steps. She had walked every path her prophecies showed her, and found only this truth. There is no single destiny waiting with outstretched hands. Only a wilderness of possibilities, shifting like desert sand. She would not follow visions like a tethered goat this time. She would choose and choose again, and live and fall and rise on the strength of her own judgment. If she conquered, it would be for something better than a burning city and a throne of swords. If catastrophe came, it would come despite her striving, not because she surrendered to a tale someone else had written for her. Daenerys Targaryen stepped out into the glare of the Carthene morning. The city lay before her, glittering and false. Beyond its walls, across deserts and oceans, lay Slaver's Bay and Westeros and the North, and 1,000 nameless villages where the decisions she had yet to make would ripple. The future did not feel like a prophecy now. It felt like an unwritten page. Her dragons hissed, restless and eager. "Come," she told them. "We have a world to meet halfway." She walked toward whatever waited with her head high, knowing that in no hall of mummified seers, in no glass candle's flame, in no jealous god's whisper, was there a single, unbreakable road. Only her feet, only her fire, only the path she would make step by step from here. Anja. The ship they found in Qarth was thin and swift, with a prow carved in the shape of a leaping fish and sails dyed the deep blue of the summer sea. Its captain, Quoro, son of Quoro, swore by every god of every port that he could outrun pirates, storms, and ill luck, and that his deck was as safe a place for a Khaleesi and her dragons as any palace. Daenerys believed none of that, but she hired him anyway. The day they cast off, Qarth's walls glittered like jewels behind them. Its carved gates and painted towers diminished with each beat of the wind, until they were no more than broken teeth on the horizon. She stood at the rail in a simple robe stained with salt already, her hair whipping around her face. Dragons huddled on the yard arm above like scrawny, sulky ravens. Jorah stood a little way off, feet braced in an easy sailor stance he had learned over years on other men's ships. His beard was grayer than when she had first known him, or perhaps she saw him more clearly now. "You could have stayed," he said over the wind. "Sorrow would have kept you in silks and gems until your hair turned white and your dragons grew too large for any city to cage. And then what?" Daenerys did not turn from the water. The sea was a broad sheet of hammered silver, sun striking sparks from its ripples. "Grow old telling tales of what I might have done. You could be safe." "I was safe once," she said, thinking of the house with the red door that had never been truly hers. "Safe is a thin blanket when winter comes, sir. And winter is coming whether I cross the sea or not." He studied her, eyes narrowed against the spray. "You saw that too," he said quietly. She had not told him what images had played behind her eyelids in the House of the Undying. Not in any detail, but Jorah Mormont was not a stupid man. He had heard the talk in the taverns, the whispered tales of White Walkers, and a long night returned. He had watched her wake from sleep with a gasp, fingers clutching at her throat as if she had felt cold hands closing there. "I saw it," she acknowledged. "And other things. 1,000 other things. Enough to know that if I sit in Qarth waiting for some perfect sign from the gods, there will be nothing left to rule when I finally move." "Mani, wadadme, kada, abar." The ship pitched. She caught the rail one-handed. Salt spray slapped her face, stinging her eyes. "Tell me about Astapor," she said. "Tell me what sort of men sell unsullied. Tell me what they fear." Jorah's jaw worked. "They fear losing gold," he said at last. "They fear losing face. They do not fear the gods, or shame, or blood. And do they fear dragons?" He glanced up. Drogon had crawled closer along the yard arm, neck craned, eyes fixed on the water with hungry fascination as flying fish burst from a wave's crest and fluttered for an instant before vanishing again. "They should," he said. When she slept, the ship's gentle rocking turned to other motions. She was on horseback again, wind in her hair, the sound of 100,000 hooves pounding dry earth. She was walking a green hill beside a man with snow in his beard, his hand brushing hers every few steps. She was standing barefoot on cold stone while men shouted in a language she did not know. And the dragons were gone, and a sword was coming toward her. And she did not know if it was meant for her, or for the thing whispering behind her in the dark. She woke with the taste of ash in her mouth and the feel of iron in her gut. Each morning she stood at the prow and watched the horizon, as if she might see her future rising out of the sea. All she saw were dolphins, the dark backs of passing whales, once a pod of sleek, green-eyed sail sails on a distant ship, trailing banners in the wind. On the 8th day, the sky turned the color of old bruises. Cloud banked on cloud, building walls in the distance. The wind picked up, shrieking in the rigging. "Storm," Quoro grunted, spitting over the side. "A big one. We can ride it or we can run from it, Khaleesi. But if the gods favor you, this is the quickest wind you will ever have to stagger." She tasted rain on the air. In one of the Undying's visions, she had seen a storm at sea flip a ship like a child's toy, had watched herself thrash in black water while Drogon screamed overhead, unable to find her in the dark. In that path, she had died with salt in her lungs, never seeing Slaver's Bay or Westeros. In another, she had ordered the captain to turn back at the first sign of bad weather. They had drifted without wind for weeks, wasting food, the crew growing mutinous. Pirates had found them in the doldrums, where she had no wind to fill her sails, and no strength left in her men to fight. That version of her had sold her dragons for passage, and died in a brothel in Lys. Her great destiny melted down into something small and sordid. "I've worn those deaths already," she said under her breath, to herself as much as to any god who might be listening across the water. "I will not wear them again." "Ride it," she told Quoro. "If the gods favor me, they'll see me through. If they do not, I'll know it sooner rather than later." The storm hit like a thrown stone. Rain lashed the decks, turning them slick. The sailcloth boomed and snapped, the mast creaking like a living thing in pain. Waves climbed higher than the masthead, gray-green walls topped with foam. The ship plunged into their troughs and clawed up their sides, shuddering. Drogon hated it. He clung to the ratlines with all his claws, wings plastered tight against his body. He hissed and spat whenever a wave crashed over the rail, drenching him. Rhaegal and Viserion, smaller and less stubborn, retreated below deck with the crew, curling in a corner of Daenerys' cabin and glaring at anyone who came too close. She stayed on deck. The storm's fury beat against her, but some strange stubbornness inside her refused to yield. She wrapped one hand around a rope fixed to the rail, braced her feet wide, and let the rain wash over her. The sea roared. Lightning ripped the sky open, showing her the world in white for a heartbeat before darkness fell again. In that stuttering illumination, she saw doors. Not wooden ones, not carved or painted, but moments. Possibilities. If she ordered the sail taken in, the mast might crack or might hold. If she forced Drogon below, he might panic and burn men alive, or he might curl around her and sleep. If the ship turned its nose into the waves, it might climb them or be driven under. She could taste each outcome as clearly as the rain. Decision became a physical thing in her hands. "Leave half sail," she shouted to Quoro over the wind. "Any less, and we'll be rolled." He squinted at her, then at the waves. He spat again, a man who had long since learned not to argue with gods or madwomen. He bellowed orders. Men scrambled, shadows against the white flares of lightning. The ship rode the storm like a wild horse. It bucked and jolted, but it did not go over. Waves crashed against its sides, but the hull held. By dawn, the clouds tore apart in ragged tatters. Sunlight spilled through in cautious fingers. The sea lay spent and sullen beneath them, heaving only a little now, as if grumbling. Daenerys leaned against the rail, every muscle aching. Her throat felt scraped raw from shouting. Salt had crusted her hair in stiff clumps. "You should sleep," Jorah said. "I will." She looked at the sky, clear now save for a few wisps. "When I am done being alive." He made a sound that might have been a laugh and might have been a groan. Astapor rose from the sea 2 days later. From a distance it looked almost fair, a necklace of red brick towers along a curving shore, banners snapping in the steady wind off the water. As they drew nearer, uglier details resolved. The scabrous stains along the walls where refuse had been flung. The pens near the harbor where human shapes huddled under the eyes of overseers. The huge bronze harpy rising over the plaza in the city's heart, its claws sunk into nothing at all, its wings spread in a pretense of shelter. "It stinks," muttered Coro as they tied up at the quay. "Worse than Karth, and that's saying something." Daenerys smelled tar and sewage and the sour fear sweat of penned flesh. "This is where they make the Unsullied," Jorah said. "They train them in those barracks there, see? March them through the Plaza of Pride so the masters can show off their discipline. Cut off their nipples and throw them to—" "I know what they do," she cut in. She had heard the tales in a dozen tongues. She had seen one of those boys in one of her other lives, standing unmoving while a master sliced at his cheek. It was one thing to hear of it, another to walk through the pens and feel hundreds of lifeless eyes following her. "Khaleesi," whispered one of her handmaidens. Ira's hand shook where it clutched the hem of Dany's robe. "We should go back to the ship. This place it is wrong." It was, and it would be wrong whether she turned away or not. "Stay close," Daenerys said. They walked through Astapor's streets with an escort of 5 of Quorro's men and Jorah at her side, hand on his sword hilt, face set. A few Qarthi merchants who had come ashore for trade trailed behind out of curiosity. Above, Drogon wheeled, his shadow sliding over the red bricks like a second, darker harpy. Rhaegal and Viserion clung to Daenerys' shoulders, turning their heads this way and that with bright, interested eyes. The masters waited for her in the Plaza of Pride. Krasny's Monaklos was as she had imagined from the tales, tall and fleshy, with a beard oiled into 3 points, and a voice that oozed contempt in every syllable of High Valyrian. His lips curled when he looked at her. He spoke as if she could not understand him, as if she were some backward savage come to marvel at civilization. Daenerys listened to every insult, every lazy slur he flung at her, about her sex, about her youth, about her dragons. In one path, she had pretended ignorance, using Missandei's translation as a shield. She had traded a dragon for 8,000 Unsullied, then taken both back in fire and blood. She had watched Astapor fall to chaos and butchery behind her. In another, she had killed Krasnys at their first meeting, snapping at the leash of her own anger, and the other masters had rallied around his corpse, their private rivalries burned away in shared outrage. She had fled that city under a hail of spears, with only a handful of soldiers. In a third, she had not bought the Unsullied at all. She had refused to deal with men who made eunuchs out of children. She had sailed on, leaving the boys behind to their fate, and dreamt of them ever after, their dead eyes following her. 8,000, Krasnys concluded, smirking. Best soldiers in the world, for one unsound beast in the girl's ship. It is a generous offer. The girl. Daenerys regarded him for a moment. Missandei stood to his left, eyes down, hands folded. She was slender and small, with skin the color of polished teak and hair bound back in gold. In the marine she had seen and in the visions, Missandei had been her shadow and her voice, her counsel in the hardest moments. Here she was still a slave. Her tongue used to lend smoothness to Krasnys' ugliness. Daenerys wondered if the girl's dreams had ever shown her more than this plaza. "You have many fine things, Krasnys Monaklos," Daenerys said in High Valyrian as pure as any nobles from the free cities. "Gilded chains, ships, bricks stained with the blood of children. But wisdom is not among them." "Me? What?" Krasnys blinked. The square seemed to inhale. Did. He cut himself off, eyes narrowing. The little whore speaks our tongue. You did not. I heard every word, she said. Every time you called me cow, I heard you. Every time you named my children beasts, I heard that too. Drogon hissed overhead as if in agreement. Missandei's eyes flicked up just once and met Daenerys. There was the tiniest spark there. Not hope, that would be too much to name, but something that might become it in time. Krasny's recovered quickly. You wish the Unsullied or you do not, he said. If you are offended by a man's tongue, perhaps you are too soft for soldiers. Daenerys smiled. It was a small, tight thing. I have seen what softness kills, she said. I have seen what hardness kills as well. I did not come here to be either. I came to bargain. He spread his hands. Then bargain. 8,000 for a dragon. A fair trade. Dragons are wild. Men can be trained. Her dragons bristled. Viserion's claws dug into Daenerys' shoulder hard enough to draw blood. She could make the same trade as before. Speak the same word at the same moment. Watch Krasny's burn. She knew the smell of his roasted flesh already. She knew the sound of chains dropping as Unsullied turned their spears on their former masters. She knew the screams that had followed, and the way Astapor had torn itself apart once she rode away. The path that had led from that plaza to a murine of crucified men and chained dragons lay open to her like a scar. This time, she took a different step. 8,000 for a dragon, she said as if considering, and for each of your lieutenants who commands them, with his personal guard. Krasny sneered. The girl would bargain with scraps. I will not give up my best men. Then the dragon stays with me, Daenerys said lightly. And I sail to your enemies. Yunkai would gladly trade gold and slaves for a creature that can burn a Astapor from the sea. I wonder what your best men would say then. His face darkened. Rage corded his neck. He saw the truth in that picture as clearly as she did. Without Unsullied, the Yunkish would be a fat prize for the taking. Without his best officers, any rebellion in Astapor would go straight for Krasny's throat. If you think your walls and your gold can shelter you from dragonfire, Daenerys said softly, you are not only cruel, you are stupid. Missandei translated every word in an even voice, her small hands moving. Her eyes stayed on Krasny's face, but a muscle jumped in her jaw. You cannot be sure Yunkai would. Krasny's began hotly, then stopped himself. A calculating light entered his eyes. Very well. 5 lieutenant commanders, with their household guard, for the 3 beasts. And your ship. Nah. 3. He would strip her of all her dragons and strand her in Astapor if she let him. There was a path where she did so. She had seen its shadow. She had stood on these same bricks watching the ships she had come on burn in the harbor, her children caged and carted away to some fat merchant's menagerie. She had died here too. No, Daenerys said. 1 dragon. Drogon. The word tasted like a lie. Drogon screamed overhead, banking suddenly, his black wings sweeping low over the plaza. Heat rolled off him in waves. Men flinched, raising hands to shield their faces. Khaleesi, Jorah hissed under his breath. Do you think I love them less than you? She murmured back, never taking her eyes off Krasny's. I rode him in other lives into fire. I watched him die for me in one. There's more than one way to keep him safe. What are you doing? Jorah demanded. Refusing to let prophecy make my choices, she said. Aloud, she added. Drogon for 8,000 Unsullied and 3 of your commanders. You will train them to obey only the one who carries the whip and coin you give me. You will march them out to the edge of the city when I ask. And you will accept that if you cheat me, you will die screaming. Men Mia. Krasny's eyed Drogon, wheeling restless against the bright sky. 3 commanders, he said. And you keep the other beasts. Done. He spat into his palm and held it out. She did not spit. She had no desire to mingle her mouth with his filth, even in pretense. She gripped his forearm instead, her fingers sinking into soft fat. His flesh was clammy. Done, she said. It was the same bargain as one of her other paths in its essential bones. Exceptionally so. A dragon for an army. But the flesh on those bones was different. Her knowledge sat in her belly like a stone. She would not walk through this city with her eyes half shut this time, telling herself she could not help such cruelty exist. She had chosen to step onto this road. She would walk it awake. Preparations took days. Krasny's did not trust her. That was good. She did not want him unwary. He brought out his unsullied in ranks, 8,000 in all. Their faces blank, their spears held in perfect alignment. He showed her the coin he had minted, a heavy iron disc stamped with the three-headed harpy of Astapor on one side, and the blunt impression of a whip on the other. Any man who held it, he promised, would command unswerving obedience. He did not understand that obedience need not last forever. Missandei was present at every meeting. Daenerys watched her more closely than she watched Krasny's. She listened to how the girl rendered Astapori Valyrian into smoother speech, how she shaded Krasny's words to make them less brutish, or more, when she thought Daenerys might need to hear the full ugliness. "Do you have family?" Daenerys asked her one afternoon, when Krasny's had gone to whip a boy for dropping a helmet, and the plaza stood briefly empty. "My parents were killed when the slavers came to Neath," Missandei said. "I have a brother somewhere in this city. He was taken for the training. I was told..." She hesitated, then said in a flat tone, "He did not have the temperament for it. I have not seen him since." "No. Temperament. Daenerys thought of the unsullied boys she had seen in her visions, standing while a master cut off a nipple, while another set a dog on them, while a third placed a living babe in their arms and told them to kill it. "There are many paths where we leave them here," she said, "where we make ourselves feel better by saying their lives were not ours to change, that their suffering was the way of things. Do you want to walk one of those?" Something flickered in Missandei's eyes again. Not hope, not yet, but anger. "No?" she said softly. "Good," Daenerys said. "Then do not let me." The day of the exchange dawned hot and still. The whole city seemed to hold its breath as the Unsullied marched out through the Harpy Gate in 8 perfect blocks. They moved as one, shields at the same angle, feet striking the dust in exact unison. The sound of it rolled across the flat ground like thunder. Drogon walked beside Daenerys. She had never done this before in any other path. In those, she had waited with her dragon chained or leshed or perched too far away to see properly. This time, she wanted Krasny's to feel his heat. She wanted the Unsullied to see, with their own eyes, that the creature supposedly traded like a coin walked by choice at her side. He came up to her shoulder now, his head almost level with hers. His black scales drank the sunlight. Flame curled faintly between his teeth. Yunkish observers sat their bright liveried horses at a distance, eyes narrowed. Other slavers from other cities lounged under awnings, fans flicking, peering through veils. Krasny strutted between the ranks, basking in their attention. "Behold!" he shouted, spreading his arms wide. Sweat gleamed under his arms darkly. 8,000 unsullied, peerless in all the world, and one beast, soon to be tamed by wiser hands. He held out the whip. It was the same one he had used in so many other lives. Ivory handle, lashes of pale leather dyed to look like old blood. A symbol of ownership, of cruelty. In other paths, she had accepted it gladly, knowing what she would do with it. This time, she saw how the Unsullied's eyes flicked to it as well. Just for a heartbeat. Just enough to tell her that for them, that whip was more than a symbol. It was a shackle fixed not to their flesh, but to their sense of self. She took it nonetheless. Her fingers closed around ivory. She felt the weight of it, the way it balanced. She lifted it, just a hair. "Dracarys," she said, but not to Drogon. Behind Krasny's, the great bronze harpy that had loomed over Astapor for centuries burst into flame. Fire crawled along its wings, licking up its hollow body. The bronze glowed, then sagged, molten. Men shouted, stumbling back as hot metal sloughed off, splattering the plaza in fiery gouts. Krasny spun, face gone slack. What is... You said the Unsullied obey the one who holds the whip, Daenerys said, raising her voice so it carried to every rank. Is that true? He gaped at her. It is true, Missandei translated, voice clear. If her hands shook, no one could see it. Daenerys turned to the Unsullied. They stood in their blocks, spears planted, shields up, smoke from the burning harpy drifting between their ranks like ghostly fingers. 8,000 dead eyes watched her. I am Daenerys Stormborn of House Targaryen, she called. Mother of dragons, you are mine now, not as slaves, as soldiers. I will not make you kill babes. I will not feed your flesh to dogs. I will give you names if you want them, gold if we have it, and something else no master here ever gave you. Nani? She raised the whip. The leather lashes curled like a dying thing. Choice. She turned, and with a single sharp motion, she cracked the whip down on the iron coin in her free hand. It snapped cleanly in two. The sound rang out like a little thunderclap, or a terrifying heartbeat. Nothing moved. Then one Unsullied laughed. It was a strange sound, rusty and raw, like a door opening that had not moved in years. It came from somewhere in the middle ranks, and it died almost as soon as it began, but not before it infected the man next to him. A tremor ran through the blocks. Kill her! Krasny screamed, spittle flying. Kill the silver whore. Protect your master. No spear moved. Dracarys, Daenerys said again softly. And this time she meant it for Drogon. Fire poured from him. It rolled over Krasny's like a breaking wave. His scream lasted longer this time. Men scattered, some flinging themselves flat, others frozen in place as heat smashed into them. The fat slaver flailed for a moment, a figure made of sudden leaping flame, then collapsed into an unrecognizable lump. Daenerys smelled burning flesh and swallowed bile. Her hand tightened on the whip. She flung it into the fire. All men who wish to leave may go, she shouted, voice raw. Take what you can carry and go. No one will stop you. Those who wish to fight for me, stay, stand, choose. Not one Unsullied moved. She felt a chill. In one vision, she had commanded them, and they had followed without question, their obedience a comfort and a trap. In another, they had turned on her at some master's secret word. Here, with the whip broken and their master dead, they stood at an edge she could not see. Then a man near the front, a slender figure, his face no more expressive than the rest, took one step forward. He sank to one knee. Your Grace, he said in slow, careful Valyrian, the words shaped as if unpacked from a dusty chest. We have never chosen. We do not know how. But if you say we may serve you, we will learn. All at once, men dropped to their knees like grains of wheat before a scythe. Daenerys' throat closed. Not all. She saw a few peel away at the edges of the formation, faces pale, heading back toward the city with stumbling steps. She let them go. Chains broke differently for each man. Missandei stood very still beside her. I will need an interpreter, Daenerys said. If you wish your freedom, you have it. If you wish to go, you may take whatever coin Krasny's left. If you wish to stay... Missandei fell to one knee. I will stay, she said, if you will have me. Drogon's fire took the rest of the masters who drew steel. The Yunkish observers fled, spurring their horses. Daenerys let them, knowing that word of what she had done would reach the other slave cities before her sails ever hove into view. That afternoon, she walked through the Unsullied barracks. The smell there was worse than any kennel. Shit, old blood. Fear ground into the very stone. Boys too young for whiskers knelt on straw pallets. Old men with faces carved into something like stone-cleaned armor that had belonged to dead comrades. She watched, and she listened. She did not free the dogs and burn Astapor utterly, as in one path. She did not ride away with nothing changed. She set men to tearing down the child markets to raising the pens. She vacated the masters' manses and gave their rooms to those who had slept on dirt. She did not crucify men by the hundred. In one life she had done that. She had ridden along a road of screaming bodies, telling herself justice required as much pain as cruelty had dealt out. She had learned what it was to have her own cruelty answered in kind. She could still see noble boys nailed to posts in Marine, their mothers' eyes like broken glass. This time she held public tribunals. The Unsullied stood in ranks as witnesses. Slaves were called to speak. Those masters who had taken pleasure in cruelty, who had given orders that stained their own hands as well as those of their minions, were hanged. Their wealth was seized and divided. Those whose guilt lay in cowardice, in not fighting a system they had been born into, were fined, stripped of title, set to manual labor under guard. It was slower than crucifixion. It was messier, but it felt less like another spoke on the same broken wheel. "Is this mercy?" Jorah asked after the third day's grim work, watching a man who had once owned 100 human souls drag bricks from a toppled wall, his fine hands blistered and bleeding. "It's not mercy for him," Daenerys said. "It is mercy for me." "How so?" "It keeps me from becoming too accustomed to the sound of men screaming," she said. She did not linger in Astapor. In another path, she had tried to garrison the city, to rule it directly. She had left behind a council and marched on, believing her work complete, only to see that council rot and splinter and call her back. She had been mired in Slaver's Bay for years. This time she stayed only long enough to see fresh bricks stacked where the worst of the old pens had been, to hear Missandei's brother, found among the rejects, shaking and thin but alive, speak his first halting word to her. "Thank." Then she called her captains. "You will form a council," she told them. "Unsullied freedmen and those former masters who have chosen to stay and work. Astapor will be ruled by those who live in it, not by a queen who means to cross the world. You will send me word if you can. You will send me nothing if you cannot. I will not pull you like puppets on strings. I will trust you." "Nani?" They looked at her as if she had spoken madness. It might be madness, but the other ways led to madness of a different sort. She sailed for Yunkai with 8,000 unsullied, 3 dragons, 2 handmaidens, Missandei, Jorah, and a clear memory of what Yunkai's yellow bricks looked like when they were stained with blood. The Yellow City met her with gold and flattery and threats. Their wise masters sent envoys in rich silks to tell her she was foolish, she was dangerous, she should go home. They sent slave soldiers to stand atop their walls, shields bright, spears gleaming. They sent coin to bribe her, then assassins when she would not be moved. In one path, she had taken their sellsword companies, turned them with promises and gold. In another, they had betrayed her at a crucial moment. In a third, she had stormed the walls and lost thousands in narrow streets. This time, she did something simpler. She set her camp out of bowshot, dug trenches, raised earthworks. She kept her dragons on tight leashes, flying them only at a distance to remind the city that sky belonged to her. She sent Missandei and Jorah to treat, not with the wise masters, but with their slaves. "You will be freed," she told those envoys she allowed into her tent, their backs bearing the scars of 100 lashes. "Not tomorrow, perhaps, not this week, but soon. If you open the gates, I will call that day today. If you do not, I will find another road. And still you will be freed." They listened with the deep hunger of men who had nothing to lose. One night, a section of Yunkai's gate simply opened. Dany's Unsullied marched through like water through a crack in a dam. There was fighting, brutal and quick, in the inner wards. The sellswords she had bought turned their cloaks. The wise masters tried to flee. Most did not succeed. The slaves surged behind her soldiers. Not a disciplined army, but a tidal wave of rage. "Stop them," Jorah said, watching as freedmen poured through the streets, overturning carts, beating their former overseers with their own whips. "If this is what your rule brings, I cannot stop them entirely," Daenerys said. The city roared around them. The dragons wheeled overhead, their shadows crisscrossing like black nets. Justice does not move at the pace of my conscience, but I can shape where it flows. She had her unsullied form sharp corridors through the human riot, blocking paths to the poorest quarters, driving the violence into the manses of the richest. She had heralds shout from every corner, "The slaves belong to no man now. The gold in this house is no longer yours. You cannot buy humans with it." It was ugly. But when dawn came, Yunkai still stood. The streets were stained but not drowned. Its markets would open again. Trade would move. And slaves from half a continent would hear that a dragon queen had freed men here and not left only ash behind. Meereen, last and proudest of the slavers' cities, read those signs and balked. By the time Daenerys came in sight of its walls, the city's nobles had crucified 163 slave children along the road, their small bodies nailed up to point with broken fingers toward the Harpy gates. The stench of them hit her long before she saw their faces. In one path, she had answered cruelty with cruelty, nailing noblemen in the same number along those bricks once she took the city. In another, she had left the children there, disgust curling her lip, and the ghosts of their little eyes had never stopped following her. This time she stopped her horse. Missandei sat frozen beside her, hand clapped over her mouth. "Take them down," Daenerys said. "Khaleesi." Grey Worm looked at her, startled. "They are. I know what they are," she said. "Take them down. Wrap them in cloth. Bury them where their parents will know to find them." "Duh. And the masters?" Jorah asked quietly. "They will answer," she said. "But not like this." It took half a day to pry the children's bodies from wood and iron. Half a day to keep flies off their small, stiff faces. Half a day during which the Marines watched from their walls, their banners flapping, their fighters lined up in the shadows. Daenerys sat on a camp stool and watched each corpse carried past. She forced herself to look. Prophecy had shown her Meereen burning, the dragons tearing their way out from under the pyramid, the streets choked with fire. It had shown her Meereen whole and indifferent, its people going about their business while slaves died under new names. It had shown her Meereen as a city she ruled until the end of her days, her dragons chained beneath her, her heart chaining with them. None of those futures involved her closing her eyes here. When the last small body had been wrapped and carried away, she rose. "Fetch me a flag," she said. "A white one." They rode up under that flag to the Harpy gate. Men shouted down in harsh, nasal Valyrian, telling her to go away, to kneel, to die. She let them shout. When they paused to breathe, she spoke. "I am Daenerys Targaryen," she called. "Stormborn, mother of dragons. I have freed Astapor and Yunkai. I have seen what is done in this city. If you open your gates and free your slaves, you may live to see your grandchildren. If you force me to take your walls, I will not crucify you. I will not burn this city to ash. I will do something worse." "Worse?" came a jeer. "What can be worse than death, little queen?" "I will put you to work," she said. "You will rebuild what you have broken with your own hands. You will carry water and bricks for those you once owned. You will live long enough to feel what it is to build a thing and know it does not belong to you alone." Laughter drifted down. "Go back to the sea, dragon girl," someone shouted. "Westeros may fear your name. We do not." She lowered the flag. "Very well," she said. "Then we will do this the hard way." They took Meereen in the dark. She sent Unsullied through the sewers, men small and lean enough to wriggle through the tight spaces. She sent freedmen from Astapor and Yunkai with them, men who had learned to move quietly under masters' noses. She sent Dario Naharis and his stormcrows to climb the walls at a different point, laughing as he went, blades twinkling. In one path, she had let Dario's reckless charm wash over her, had taken him into her bed, had leaned on him more heavily than he could support, and his betrayal had nearly broken her. In another, she had had him killed for insolence and regretted it ever after when his absence left a gap on the field. In this one, she kept him close enough to see and far enough not to touch. By dawn, Meereen's Harpy banner came down. In its place, On a tall spear flapped a simple sheet of rough cloth with a three-headed dragon painted in charcoal and blood. It looked crude compared to the rich embroidery of the slaver's sigil. It suited her better. Meereen did not burn. It smoldered. There were riots, sudden bursts of violence in alleyways, masters dragged from beds and beaten in the streets. But every place she saw such a crowd, she sent her soldiers to break it up, not to join. She held tribunals here too. Slaves spoke, masters answered. It was slower, uglier, harder than simply giving an order to burn the city. But each day, she woke and heard hammers, not screams. "You could stay," Sir Barristan Selmy said one evening, as they stood on the pyramid's broad terrace and looked out over the city. He had come to her, as in so many of her visions. Old, honorable, full of shame for lies told to other kings. He had knelt to her and offered his sword. In some lives she had accepted without reservation. In others she had sent him away. Here, she had taken him into her service, but not as a blind idol. She listened and weighed. "The Bay needs you," he went on. "They will devour each other without you. Already the other cities scheme to undo what you have done, if you leave. If I leave, they will have to learn to stand without me," she said. "If I stay, I become another harpy. I will never cross the narrow sea. The winter that is coming will arrive without me there. Ne, Dani, Dia." "You speak often of this winter." Barristan's white brows knit. "I have seen snow in King's Landing. I have seen hard seasons. But you speak as if the stories of the long night were true." "They are," she said. "How can you know?" She thought of the wall, the Night King's eyes, the way magic had torn through her when she burned him. She thought of John's face in the snow, horror and awe mixing as the dead fell. "I know," she said. "And I know that if I wait for letters and ravens from a world across the sea that does not believe in my dragons or its own ghosts, it will be too late." Barristan was silent a long moment. "She will not thank you," he said abruptly. "Who?" "Westeros," he said. "The lords, the small folk, the ones whose fields you save from frost and whose children you keep from the dark. They will not thank you. They will hate you for being foreign, for having dragons, for upsetting the careful balance of their misery. They will call you monster in one breath and beg you for bread in the next." "No." He spoke as if he knew. In some lives he did. He had watched one king burn his enemies and another starve his people. He had watched fools be lauded and the wise die unnamed. "Perhaps," Daenerys said. "But I will have to live with myself after, sir. Not with them. I can live with their hatred. I cannot live with knowing I stayed where it was easier while the dead marched." He bowed his head. "Then you must go," he said. "And sooner rather than later." Leaving Meereen nearly broke her. She had thought leaving Braavos impossible when she was a child. She had thought leaving the bones of Khal Drogo harder. She had thought she understood the cost of turned backs. Meereen's streets were no longer full of chains when she rode through them for the last time. Children played in squares where no slave market stood. Men and women argued loudly in taverns without fearing a master's whip. The harpy's severed head sat in a corner of the plaza, moss growing over its bronze features. She had not remade the city into something pure. That would have been another kind of tyranny. She had cracked it open, though. What grew from that break would be its own. A council waited at the base of the pyramid to see her off. Grey Worm, in the blue cloak of the commander of the Unsullied. Missandei, scrolls under her arm. 3 former masters, stripped of many privileges but still possessed of wealth, now tied to rebuilding. A weaver who had led bread riots before joining the freedmen's committees. A priest of the Giscari gods with harpy tattoos on his cheeks who had spoken against sacrifice and found himself beaten for it. "Your Grace," the weaver said, bowing. "If things go poorly here, if the Yunkish return or the Volantinis, will you come back? If. In one path, She had circled this bay over and over, pulled by every fresh crisis. In another, she had sailed away and never looked back, and Slaver's Bay had fallen back into old ways as soon as her sails dipped below the horizon. In a third, she had left a dragon to roost here, a constant threat that kept peace through fear. "I cannot promise," she said. "The war I mean to fight across the sea will not be small." He nodded, resigned. "Then we will have to manage," he said. "I think we can. You have broken the wheel enough that it no longer rolls as smoothly." "Nadi. Nada. It should not roll at all," Daenerys said. "It should be dismantled, rebuilt. Perhaps it will never be what I would make it. That is the truth of leaving, but it will be something other than what it was." She had to live with that. On the day her fleet left the Bay of Dragons, she refused to use the old name. Marine's harbor was full of noise. Freedmen crowded the docks, waving cloths and shouting. Unsullied stood in ranks along the quay, faces still, shields held like mirrors for the morning light. Drogon launched himself from the pyramid's shoulder as her ship slipped its moorings. He soared overhead, screaming, then settled on the mast. Rhaegal and Viserion followed, their wings casting shifting shadows over the water. Daenerys stood at the prow. The sea ahead was wide and gray. Somewhere beyond that horizon lay Westeros. Dragonstow's black cliffs, King's Landing's red roofs, Winterfell's cold towers. She had seen that land burn. She had seen it freeze. She had seen herself sit a throne made of swords and cut herself bloody on every step. She had seen herself die in its heart, stabbed through by the man she loved most. Those futures flickered at the edge of her sight like heat mirages. She did not know which she was sailing toward. "Do you ever tire of looking where you are not?" Missandei asked her quietly. Daenerys blinked. "I look where I must," she said. "If I did not, I would be a fool." "But you could be happy," Missandei said. "Here, with what you have done already. With the people who look to you as..." She gestured helplessly at the shore, words failing. "As what? A savior? A queen? A breaker of chains?" Daenerys watched a cluster of children on the quay, bare feet black with tar, waving with both hands. One of them had painted a dragon on his chest in red clay. "I could be content," she said slowly. "For a time, then winter would come, and I would have to remember that I chose myself over all those who never knew my name. I have lived that life in my dreams. It is not one I can live awake." Missandei considered that. "I do not know if I would choose as you do," she said. "I have seen enough of chains to value any day without them." "You are not me," Daenerys said. "You do not have dragons, or a name men whisper from Pentos to Dorne as if it were a storm at sea. You are not burdened with the knowledge of 1,000 dead evenings." "No, it may be burdened," Missandei repeated. "But not blessed." "Both," Daenerys said. The voyage to Westeros took longer than she liked. Storms drove them south. Once, a Greyjoy longship crept up on their flank, its sails as black as crow feathers, its crew howling. Drogon's fire sent it to the bottom before they could close, its mast snapping, its hull splitting as men leaped into a boiling sea. "Euron Greyjoy," Jorah said, watching the last of the ship vanish. "That banner, I have heard tales of him, bad ones. In some lives he does worse," Daenerys said, thinking of a horn that could bind dragons and a madman's grin. "If I can cut his path here, that is one fewer nightmare I have to wake into." They landed not at King's Landing or Dragonstone, but on a stony piece of coast in Dorne near Sunspear. In one path, she had sailed straight for the capital, trusting in her dragons and her righteous cause. She had crashed against Cersei's cunning like a wave on rocks. In another, she had gone to Dragonstone and sat brooding while the pieces moved elsewhere. Here, she chose a place that had long memories of Targaryens and old grudges against those who had toppled them. Prince Doran Martell received her in a sun-drenched hall, his gout-swollen feet tucked under a blanket on his chair, his dark eyes thoughtful. His daughter Arianne stood at his shoulder, full-bodied and fierce, her gaze assessing. "I had a letter once," Doran said after the formal words were done. "From your brother, the Beggar King. He promised me the world if I would give him my sister's hand. He promised me dragons that did not then exist. He promised me vengeance in bright, bloody colors." "No." He looked at Drogon, sprawled across the terrace outside like a living shadow, his wings half furled to catch the sun. "You do not have to promise dragons," he said. "I can see them. I can promise more than dragons," Daenerys said. "I can promise you a war that will make any vengeance on the Lannisters seem small." Ah, his mouth twisted. That he had heard as well. Stories traveled fast when they were frightening enough. "You believe in this coming night?" he asked. "This tale of dead men walking?" "I have seen them," she said. She told him of the wall, of Jon, of the Night King's eyes. She did not tell him how many times she had died fighting him in her dreams. That was her own burden. She gave him the broad strokes. An enemy that would not bargain, would not be moved by gold or words, only by fire and steel. "And you want Dorne to march north with you," Doran said. "To spill its blood in snow for a people who have never shed a tear for our dead." "Yes," she said simply. "I want that." He studied her for a long time. In one path, he said no. In another, he said yes, but sent only a token force. In a third, he agreed and died of his illness before he could do anything, leaving the decision to others more hot-headed. In this one, he turned to Arianne. "What do you think, daughter?" he asked. The question startled Daenerys more than his earlier skepticism. She had seen too many lords treat their daughters as pawns, not counselors. Arianne stepped forward, eyes bright. "I think the wheel has crushed Dorne too," she said. "We have waited for vengeance against the throne that took Elia and her children. We have simmered, we have plotted. And what has come of it? Hairline cracks in old stone. This," she nodded toward Daenerys. "This is a hammer. It may shatter us as well as our enemies. But I am tired of waiting, father." Her gaze slid to Daenerys, sharp. "You will not burn my people," she said. "Will you?" "No," Daenerys said. "I will not. I have done enough burning in my sleep." She did not say that in some futures, Dorne burned, despite her. That mountains melted and sand turned to glass. That dragon circled over Sunspear and dropped fire until even the scorpions on its walls boiled. Those futures had begun with other steps. She could choose different ones. Doran sighed. "I am old," he said. "I have spent my life delaying fires, putting them in jars. Your coming is a fire I cannot bottle." He turned back to Daenerys. "I will send spears north," he said. "Not all. Enough. My son Trystane will go, with men sworn to him, to stand where the cold is worst. A martell has burned for the realm before. He can freeze for it now." "Thank you," Daenerys said. "You misunderstand." Doran's mouth was rueful. "I am not doing this for you. I am doing it because if this winter is as you say and we do nothing, it will roll over us too. Dorne is not immune to snow, or to the storms your dragons bring. Motives do not change the bodies on the field," she said. "I will take what aid you give me and do what I can with it." From Dorne, she went to Dragonstone. The ancient Targaryen seat felt familiar, though she had never set foot on it in any life she remembered fully. Black stone worn smooth by wind and waves. Courtyards that smelled of salt and smoke. A hall whose ceiling was carved like dragon rib cages, lending every voice an echo. She walked the same steps Aegon had walked, Rhaenys and Visenya at his side. In some lives she had come here alone, knowing no one. In others she had found allies waiting. Tyrion Lannister with his sharp eyes and sharper tongue, Varys with his secrets, Stannis Baratheon, stiff and iron, clutching at prophecy as if it were a cloak against his own doubts. Here, she found not Stannis but Stannis' daughter. Shireen Baratheon sat by a brazier, a book on her lap, her gray-scaled cheek turned toward the fire. Davos Seaworth hovered near her like a nervous gull. Behind them, the carved wooden table of Westeros stretched, the place where so many plans had been laid. Shireen blinked when Daenerys entered, then scrambled to her feet, nearly dropping her book. "Your Grace," she said, making a clumsy curtsy. Sorry, we did not expect." "Stannis Baratheon?" Daenerys asked. "Dead," Davos said gruffly. "Fighting in the snow for a throne that was never really his. The Red Woman followed another fire in the end, left him shivering in the dark." He bowed awkwardly. "I'm Sir Davos," he said. "Was never much one for kings, truth be told, or queens. But I've seen some strange things on this island. Fire on the water, shadows walking. I've seen enough to believe half of what the Red Woman said, and that's more than I'd like." "Then you believe in what's coming," she said. He nodded once. "I do," he said. "And I know we're not ready." Shireen stepped closer. "Are those really dragons?" she asked in a rush, eyes wide. "I've read about them, but seeing them in the flesh." Drogon shifted outside on the volcanic slope, his weight making the stones underfoot vibrate faintly. Rhaegal and Viserion perched on a tower, their shadows long in the afternoon light. "They are?" Daenerys said. "Do they talk?" the girl asked. "Not in words," Daenerys said. "But they tell me things." "Like what?" She thought of the House of the Undying, of skies full of futures, of burning cities and frozen walls. "Like when to burn," she said, "and when not to." Shireen nodded solemnly, as if that made perfect sense. "Then you should talk to Jon Snow," she said. "He's on his way here." The name thudded in the air like a stone dropped into deep water. "Here?" Daenerys repeated. Davos nodded. "He was at Winterfell," he said. "King in the North." The words tasted strange on his tongue. Then he went to fight the dead at the Wall. Came back with fewer men and more ghosts. He means to come here to ask for help. I sent a raven when I saw your sails. Of course he did. The paths she had walked in prophecy had braided around Jon Snow like threads around a spindle. In one, he was her lover and her doom. In another, he was her rival. In a third, he died before she ever met him. A nameless frozen body on the far side of the world, while she sat a throne that meant nothing in a dead land. Here, she would see him with her waking eyes for the first time. She did not know which of the faces she had seen in those other lives he would wear. When his ship finally came in sight, gray sails against gray sea, her heart beat faster than was reasonable. She watched from the ramparts as the boat bumped against the stone steps, as men leaped out to tie it off. Jon Snow climbed last. His hair was longer than in her visions, bound back in a rough knot. His armor was plain, his cloak patched. He moved like a man who had grown too intimate with cold and did not trust warmth. Ghosts trotted at his heels, fur as white as snow, eyes burning red. He looked up. For a heartbeat, their gazes met across wind and distance. Daenerys felt absurdly, as if the House of the Undying had reached into this moment and laid a hand on it. She felt every version of this meeting stacked behind her back like shadows. The one in which they had circled each other, testing. The one in which they had fallen into each other's arms. The one in which he had sunk a blade into her heart. She descended to meet him on the steps. "Jon Snow," she said in the courtyard, where dragon shadows strip-ed the cobbles. "King in the North." "Daenerys Targaryen," he replied. His voice was quieter than she'd expected, but it carried. "The Mother of Dragons." He sounded as if he half-doubted the title even as he spoke it. She gestured toward Drogon. "Doubt no longer," she said. Drogon lowered his head. Jon stood his ground. Ghost's hackles rose, but he did not snarl. He sniffed at Rhaegal's tail when the green dragon swung it idly past, then sneezed, offended. Davos stepped forward. "Your Grace," he said to Jon, "this is her. This is... well, You can see who this is." "I can," Jon said. He looked at Daenerys again. "I came to ask for help," he said. "For the North, for the world, if half of what I've seen spreads south. I did not come to bend the knee. I came as a king. In some lives I demand that you kneel," she thought. "In some you do. In others you refuse. And we spend precious weeks circling like dogs around a bone while the dead march." She could feel those wasted days pressing at the edges of her skull. "I will not ask you to kneel," she said aloud. Davos blinked. Jon frowned, as if he had prepared arguments and was offended at being unable to use them. "You won't?" he said. "You are king in the North," she said. "I am queen of what I have freed. If we live through this, we can argue about borders and vassalage. If we die, the dead will not care whose knee bent to whom." "Nay." The corner of his mouth twitched. "I expected someone different," he said. "From what people say." "What did they say?" she asked. "That you burned a city," he said, blunt. "That you crucified men. That you're your father's daughter. In some lives, every one of those things was true. I have burned cities in my dreams," she said. "I have crucified men. I am my father's daughter, and I am not. I have seen what I might become if I stopped choosing and let the worst of me slide into the gaps. I mean not to do that. None. Dante. Pa. Ow. Hey. You talk like a maester," he said. "Or a madman. Or a seer," Davos muttered. "Or a girl who drank something foul in Korth," she said dryly. He huffed a faint laugh to spite himself. "Will you help us?" he asked. "Will your dragons come north?" "Yes," she said. "But not just north, south as well." He frowned. "South?" he said. The threat will not stay where you left it," she said. "When we burn the dead in the snow, their smoke will blow south. Men there will smell it and say, 'Better them than us.' While we fight in the cold, they will fight over chairs. When we come back with fewer men, they will see weakness and strike." "None. Shirai." He stared at her as if she had peeled his thoughts out of his skull and laid them bare. "How do you know that?" he asked. "I know men," she said. "And I know this throne you all love so much. I have seen the knife it hides in its seat." "You want it," he said. "Yes," she said. "But I am not as foolish about it as some of my selves have been." Ghost tilted his head. "Selves?" Jon repeated. She almost laughed. "Never mind," she said. "We will need grain, weapons, dragon glass, dragon steel, if it exists. Men who will not flee at the first sight of blue eyes. What do you have?" "Dragon glass," he said slowly. "Under this island. I came partly to ask if you'd let us mine it." "I will," she said. "And I will help. My dragons can melt rock faster than any pick. My men can carry more than ghosts. We'll need to convince the rest," Davos said. "The lords, the South. Cersei won't." "I know what Cersei will and will not do," she said, thinking of red lips and cruel eyes. In some lives, she had faced that woman across a shattered city. In others, Cersei had died before she ever arrived, crushed under falling stone or killed by her own allies. I will not waste time trying to turn her into something she is not. "Then what?" Jon began. "We will fight 2 wars at once," she said. "One with fire and steel, one with words and bread. In both, we will choose where we spend our strength. I will not burn a city just because I saw myself do it once." He looked at her for a long time. "You talk like you've done this before," he said. "Like you've lived this war and are living it again." "In a way," she said softly. He shook his head, as if to clear it. "In any case," he said, more brisk, "we need each other." "We do," she said. He extended his hand. In one path, she had taken it and pulled him closer than politics required. In another, she had refused it and put days of distrust between them. In a third, she had taken it then later felt the blade he drove into her heart. She took it now with a clear head. His palm was calloused. "Then let's be done with pretty speeches," he said, "and get to work." So they did. They mined dragonglass from Dragonstow's bones, carving it out in dark shards. They forged it into spearheads and arrowheads, swords and daggers. Gendry Baratheon, called back from the forges of King's Landing, hammered steel and obsidian together until his hands bled. Daenerys' dragons melted rock and made slag. She flew north with Jon and a handful of the best fighters, not to capture a white for show, as in one path, but to see the terrain, to understand the enemy, to test her fire against their numbers with careful strikes, not desperate lunges. She burned small bands of the dead, learning how they moved, how they regrouped, when they broke. She kept Drogon high enough that an ice spear could not reach him easily, mindful of the path in which she had watched Viserion fall like a burning star. War in the north was as ugly as the visions had promised. Men froze. Men broke. Some houses refused to send troops, clinging to old grudges. Some bent the knee to her when they saw her dragons. Some knelt only to Jon. She did not waste time forcing unity where it would not grow. "You cannot rule a graveyard," she told Tyrion Lannister when at last he came, thin and wary, from the ruins of Casterly Rock to offer his counsel. "I have tried in dream. It does not suit me." "You dream big," he said, pouring himself wine with hands that shook only a little. "I suppose I should be honored to have a place in your nightmares. In some, you die in chains," she said. "In others, you poison me. In one, you marry Sansa Stark and rule Winterfell badly together." He choked on the wine. "I'd prefer the chains," he coughed. "Then let's avoid that path," she said. They stood together on the ramparts of Winterfell when the dead came in force. The battle that followed was madness. No plan survives contact with an enemy that does not tire or fear. Dragons banked and dived, their fire carving incandescent arcs through the night. Men screamed and slipped in the churned mud, their breath white in the air, their blood darker. Jon cut his way through ranks of husks, long claws edge flashing, ghost at his side like a red-eyed shadow. Daenerys rode Drogon above the chaos, fire pouring from his throat until her own chest burned in sympathy. She did not dive too low. She did not hover near walls where arrows and javelins rose. She did not chase the Night King alone, trusting some prophecy that said she could not die while some comet shone. He came to her instead. He walked through his army as if through tall grass, ice spear in hand. The dead parted before him without a sound. She saw him look up at her. His eyes were the same as in every vision, cold blue, bottomless. He lifted the spear. Daenerys hauled on Drogon's neck without thinking. He banked, the spear whistling past so close she felt the wind of its passage. It struck the sky and shattered. Shards of ice rained down. Drogon screamed in fury. Flame burst from his throat. A torrent so hot it turned snow to steam 10 yards above the ground. The dead blackened and fell. The Night King walked through the fire. The heat did not touch him. Flames curled around him, bending away at an invisible barrier. Of course, she thought with a strange, distant clarity, he is not a man. He is a knot in the fabric of the world. You cannot burn a knot. You must cut it. Higher, she ordered Drogon. He climbed, wings beating furiously. The cold thinned. Stars pricked the sky, distant and indifferent. From that height, the battle was a pattern. Clusters of light, torches, magic, dragonfire, biting against a tide of darkness. The wall loomed to the far north, a faint line on the horizon, cracked now in places where wildings had passed, and war had scarred its face. She could feel, distantly, Bran Stark's gaze on her. The boy, now a man, now the strange three-eyed thing that had once been a boy, sat in the godswood below, quiet amid the chaos, watching for the moment. He had his own threads of futures tangled around him. She had spoken with him only once before sending him to his tree. His eyes had been old and young both. "You've seen what I might become," she had said. "I've seen what you have been," he had replied. "And what you may be. None of it is fixed. Is there a path where I sit the Iron Throne and never burn a soul who does not deserve it?" she had asked. "Yes," he had said. "Is there one where I do all that I have dreamed and die warm and beloved in my bed?" "Yes," he had said. "Is there one where the dead win?" "Yes." He had not comforted her. Now, above Winterfell, she saw the threads knot. "Down," she told Drogon. She did not dive for the Night King. She dived for Jon. He stood in the thick of it, breath steaming, long claw arm heavy. Ice rimed his hair. His men had fallen back around him. The circle of living bodies contracted like a pupil in harsh light. Drogon crashed down in a flurry of snow and flame, scattering whites. Daenerys leaned from the saddle, hand outstretched. "Come," she shouted. Jon looked up. In one life, he had turned from her. In another, he had hesitated too long, and a spear of ice had taken him in the back. In a third, she had left him there, trusting some nonsense about prophecies and chosen ones, and had watched him die while she chased the Night King, only to fall herself. "Here," he jumped. Drogon's claws dug into the churned earth, pushing off. They surged upward as whites leaped and fell, grasping at empty air. Jon clung awkwardly behind her, one arm around her waist, the other trying to hold Longclaw. Ghost howled below, cut off as the distance grew. "Hell live!" Jon shouted in her ear, as if sensing her flinch. "He always does." "That makes one of us," she yelled back. Below, the Night King watched their ascent. He raised his arms. The tide of dead swelled around Winterfell's walls. Men screamed on the battlements as fallen comrades lurched to their feet beside them, eyes gone blue. "Now," Bran whispered in his godswood. Far away on Dragonstone, Shireen Baratheon read from a book by firelight. At the wall, Dolorous Ed muttered a prayer he did not quite believe. In King's Landing, Cersei Lannister slept badly, fingers clenched around the hilt of a dagger under her pillow. In Meereen, a child with a painted dragon on his chest threw a stone at a former master who had raised a hand to strike his mother. Threads tightened. Drogon roared. His fire poured from him, but not at the Night King. Not this time. Daenerys turned his head with the pressure of her knees, aiming at the pockets where the dead were thickest, at the lines where they pressed hardest against the living. She carved lanes of light through darkness, not seeking glory but space. "Why?" Jon shouted. "He's there. You can't cut a knot with fire," she shouted back. "You know that. You said so once." "No." He stared at her. "Bran," he said. "Yes," she said. They landed in the Godswood. The air there was eerily quiet. The battle sounds came muffled, distant, as if through thick cloth. Snow drifted down, flakes melting on the warm bark of the heart tree where Bran sat, eyes white, body still. The Night King stood 10 paces away, sword of ice in hand. He turned as they slid from Drogon's back. He looked at Daenerys with an expression she had never seen on his face before. Puzzlement. "You weren't here," he said. His voice was like cracking ice. "In most paths," Daenerys said. "I stayed in the sky. I chased you into storms. I trusted a sword in a hero's hand to do what needed doing while I burned men who screamed my name. You learned," he said. "Enough," she said. "More than enough." Jon stepped beside her. Longclaw's pommel gleamed faintly in the strange, flat light. The Valyrian steel along its length seemed to drink the cold instead of reflecting it. "The last time we stood like this," the Night King said, "you burned me and broke the world a little. Do you mean to do it again?" "I mean to try something else," she said. She raised her hand. Drogon lunged. He did not breathe fire. He slammed into the Night King with his full weight, claws tearing at the ice armor. The sword of frost swung, scoring lines in Drogon's scales. Blue light flashed where claw met ancient magic. Jon dove. His blade met the Night King's torso, but not in the center. Bran had told him once, in a voice that was not entirely his own, that the heart of that thing lay not where one might expect. Lower, Bran had said. Nearer the belly, where the first knife went in. Jon drove Longclaw low. I screamed. The Night King shuddered. For a heartbeat, his hand closed on Drogon's shoulder, fingers sinking into black scales. Frost spread from his grip, reaching for Daenerys' leg where she stood too close. She did not flinch away. Magic burned up through her bones, cold and fire colliding. It felt like being ripped in half. She thought she heard the House of the Undying laughing. Enough, she told it. Longclaw punched through. The Night King exploded. Not into snow and cinders this time, but into something like light. It poured upward and outward, a shockwave that slammed against Drogon and Daenerys and Jon like a wall. For a breathless instant, everything was brightness, unbearable. Then it was gone. The Godswood was full of bodies. Some were old, roots tangled through them. Some were new, their faces still and gray. All were truly dead now, the unnatural spark gone from them. On the field beyond the walls, whites dropped where they stood. The strange blue fire in their eyes went out. Daenerys fell to her knees. Her leg where the Night King had touched her throbbed. Frostbite crept up it in black and white patterns. Her hands shook. "Dany," Jon said, grabbing her shoulders. "Daenerys, I'm here," she gasped. She was not entirely sure what she was. She felt something missing inside her. Not the dragons. They were still there, their minds like great furnaces in the back of hers. Not her own thoughts. Something more nebulous. The part of her that had seen 1,000 doors felt thinner. "We did it," Jon said. "Yes," she said. "This time." He frowned. "What do you mean, this time?" he asked. She laughed once, a short, cracked thing. "Nothing," she said. "Everything. Help me up." He did. They limped from the Godswood together. Winterfell's courtyards were full of groans and sobbing. Men embraced, wept, shouted. Some simply sat and stared, shock hollowing them out. The air was thick with the smell of blood and smoke and shit. Cersei Lannister did not die in that battle. She died months later, in King's Landing when Daenerys' fleet sailed up the Blackwater and her dragons perched on the city's walls. She did not burn in dragonfire. She choked on dust as the Red Keep shuddered and cracked under a clever mix of wildfire and undermining. She died clutching at Jaime Lannister's hand, cursing everyone but herself. Daenerys did not burn the city. She threatened to. She flew over the rooftops, showing the people what could happen. She burned the Iron Fleet in the harbor, Euron Greyjoy's ships turning to floating pyres. She melted the gates, reducing lion sigils to slag. She set the scorpions that had been turned on her dragons alight, one by one, making sure every man on the walls saw what happened to those who tried to chain fire. But when the bells rang, she pulled up. They tolled mournfully, a sound that slid along the dragon's spine and into her bones. In one life, she had ignored them. In that path, she had flown street by street, fire pouring from Drogon's jaws, burning men, women, children, died. She had told herself she was burning a symbol, a system. The screams had followed her into every dream thereafter. In another, she had hesitated, and that hesitation had been read as weakness. A faceless man's knife had slid between her ribs in a crowded market months later, sent by some lordling whose estate she had spared. Here, she banked Drogon away from the city, flames streaming harmlessly into the sky. "Khaleesi!" he roared, displeased. "Not today," she whispered into his neck. She landed in the courtyard before the Red Keep's cracked doors. Smoke coiled from the rubble. Men knelt or lay where they had fallen. Grey Worm stood with his sword bloody, unsullied, arrayed behind him. His face was as unreadable as always, but his eyes burned. "Your Grace," he said. The Lion Queen is dead. The city is yours. We have found Lannister men hiding, gold cloaks trying to flee. What do you command?" "In another life," she had said, "kill them all. In another," she had said, "show no mercy. In another," she had said, "take no prisoners, only corpses." Here, she heard bells. "Disarm them," she said. "Lock them up. Feed them. We will hold trials when we can." Grey Worm's jaw tightened. "Too many trials, and too much mercy, and no one will fear you," Tyrion murmured at her shoulder. "Enough have feared me," she said. She walked into the Red Keep. The Iron Throne sat crooked in a hall half choked with dust, patches of ceiling fallen to exposed sky. Sunlight slanted through, catching motes and lending the scene an unreal quality. In one path, she had walked toward it alone, hand outstretched, only to feel a blade slide between her ribs. In another, she had never come here at all. Here, Jon walked beside her. He had refused to be called king after the battle with the dead. He had bent no knee, but he had laid the weight of the North's crown aside and taken up the role of something else. A bridge, Targaryen and Stark, fire and ice, duty and choice. Daenerys looked at the throne. It was ugly, not just in the way of melted swords, but in the way it sat there demanding attention, demanding blood. Every edge whispered of cut fingers, of men who had torn their hands trying to get a grip. "Do you want it?" Jon asked quietly. "Yes," she said. "And no." He huffed out a breath. "That's not an answer," he said. "It is the only honest one," she said. She stepped forward. Her fingers brushed the cool metal of one twisted hilt. Behind her closed eyes, doors flickered. In one, she sat this throne and became all fire, no mercy. In another, she refused it, and chaos bloomed, a dozen petty kings sprouting like weeds. In a third, she melted it down and built something new. The last appealed. "Help me," she said. Jon put his shoulder against the side of the throne. Drogon watched through the wound in the wall, his eye huge. She whispered a word. Fire poured from his mouth, not like a weapon, but like a forge. Valyrian steel softened. The welded mass wailed as it twisted. Swords slumped and fell, their edges losing sharpness in a wash of orange-yellow light. Metal ran in rivulets down the steps, pooling in gleaming puddles that reflected her face back to her, warm. When the fire died, the thing that had been the Iron Throne was unrecognizable. In its place stood a rough, blackened block of cooling metal, its surface still glowing faintly in places. No blades, no barbs, no arms to rest on. "A chair," Jon said, a little dazed. "You turned a throne into a block." "A beginning?" she said. She would have it beaten into something better in time. Not a single seat, perhaps, but a ring. A table where king and lords and small folk representatives could sit and shout at each other, and she could listen and choose. She had walked every path her prophecies had shown her and seen how they ended when she surrendered to them. In madness, in martyrdom, in emptiness. This path she would walk awake. Will they accept it? Jon asked. The lords? The people? Some will, she said. Some will not. They will plot and quarrel, and in time, someone will try to make a throne of sharp edges again. And you? I will stop them if I can, she said. If I cannot, I will have to live with the path I took and hope it was enough. He looked at her a long moment. You're not the queen the stories promised, he said. No, she agreed. I'm not. In some of those tales, she would be villain. In others, hero. In truth, she was only a woman with dragons who had seen too many ways to fail and was trying, in this one narrow, fragile world, to choose better. Outside, on the broken walls of King's Landing, the people began to shout. Some cried, "Dragon!" Some cried, "Queen!" Some cried, "Food!" Most cried, "Enough!" Daenerys Targaryen listened. Then she stepped down from the cooling block of melted steel and walked toward the shouts, her dragons overhead and Jon Snow at her side, into a future that no prophecy had written for her. Kenta. The city stank of fear and broken stone. On the second day after the bells, after the undermined keeps had finished their slow collapse and the last fires guttered out in alleys choked with ash, Daenerys Targaryen stood atop the broken outer steps of the Red Keep and looked down on the shattered heart of King's Land. She had expected to feel more. Triumph, perhaps. Vindication. The dizzying satisfaction her brother had dreamed aloud in 100 cramped rooms, drunk on sour wine and the sound of his own voice. Instead, she felt tired. Not the easy ache of a day in the saddle, nor the hot fatigue of battle, but a deep, bone-deep weariness, as if each step she had taken across the world had left a weight behind in her, and now all those weights had woken on the same morning. The city looked back up at her with 1,000 eyes. The space below the steps, where Lannister knights had once mustered in glittering ranks, was full of bodies, not dead, but bowed. Men in torn red cloaks, some bareheaded, some with their gilded helms under their arms. Gold cloaks with badges hastily ripped off, some still bloody at the tear. Merchants, guildsmen, fishwives, ragged children pressed forward between taller shapes, their faces turned up in mingled curiosity and dread. They had heard of her, these people. Songs and rumors from across the narrow sea, tales from sailors and sellswords. A dragon queen, a madwoman, a savior, a butcher. Now they saw only a small woman in dusty leathers, her hair a tangle of silver and ash, 3 not quite grown dragons restless on the shattered crown of the hall behind her. Jon Snow stood a half-step off her shoulder, dark amidst her brightness, cloak stirring. Grey Worm and a knot of Unsullied flanked her on one side. Tyrion Lannister, dusty and hollow-eyed, stood on the other, like a penitent dragged to a shrine he did not quite believe in. Davos Seaworth lurked further back, hands clasped, watching the crowd instead of her. Even now, his instincts ran downhill, toward the men who would eat or starve because of whatever words she spoke. "Say something," Tyrion murmured. His voice was raw, but it held a thread of wryness yet. "If you stand there glowering, they'll think every rumor true." "I'm thinking what to say," she answered without moving her lips. In one future, she had spoken of destiny here, of right and fire and chains. The words had tasted sweet and sharp, like a fruit that left the tongue numb after. In another, she had not spoken at all. She had flown and burned and let terror be her tongue. In both, she had lost herself. She drew a slow breath. "My people," she called. The words felt strange in her mouth. In Meereen, my people had meant those who had lain in chains and those who had fastened them. In Vaes Dothrak, it had meant riders who followed her for shared blood and shared plunder. Here, it meant faces she did not know and might never know, bound to her by war. The sound of wind and distant hammering died. "You have had many kings," Daenerys said, her voice carrying down into the square and echoing off scorched stone. "Dragon kings, lion kings, stag kings, boy kings who played at ruling with your lives as their toys. You have had queens who loved their children more than the realm, lords who loved their power more than your lives, and usurpers who loved their swords more than either. Now," she paused. Drogon shifted behind her, his shadow sliding long and black over the broken steps. His breath gusted hot across the back of her neck. "I will not stand here and tell you that I am different by birth," she went on. "I am a Targaryen. My ancestors forged this realm with fire. My father lost it in the same. The blood in my veins has burned cities before I was born. Many of you have heard what I have done across the sea. Some of it is true. Some of it is not. All of it is on me. I will not pretend innocence." "No." A ripple went through the mass of people below, as if a wind had passed across tall grass. "What I will tell you," she said, "is this. I have seen where that road ends. I have walked it in dreams, and in the waking world both. It leads to ash. It leads to thrones built on bones. It leads to a city like this one burned to black glass under a sky filled with smoke. No. She swept a hand out, encompassing the cracked towers, the caved-in roofs, the sagging stretches of the city wall. You know what I could do, she said, and Drogon hissed, fire curling between his teeth. But knowing and doing are not the same. I chose not to burn you. I chose to melt this. She turned and gestured to the glistening, cooling lump that had once been the Iron Throne. Instead of sitting on its swords and pretending that made me your better, I will have to keep choosing every day. I will fail. I will err. I will do things that hurt you and help you both. That is what rulers do, no matter what banners they fly. No. She saw faces shift. Some hardened, some softened, just a fraction. I cannot promise you that life under me will be easy, she said. But I can promise you 3 things. First, no man will own another in these lands again. Chains will be broken and will stay broken. Second, the law will weigh your birth and name less heavily than your deeds. A poor man who murders will swing as surely as a rich one. A rich man who steals will pay more than a poor one. And third, your voice will be heard, not only through lords and septons, but with your own mouths, in councils where my rule will be questioned, and my decisions challenged. No, there was a murmur at that, louder than before. Words like council and voice had rarely traveled this far down into flea bottom in the fish market. I cannot do this alone, she said. I will not try. You are exhausted by war, by fire, by hunger. So am I. We will rebuild this city together, or it will fall on all of us. Start there. Later, we will see what else can be remade. No, Waisa. She drew breath to finish, and for an instant, the old temptation flared. To promise a new world in which every injustice was righted, every debtor freed, every hungry child fed. The House of the Undying had shown her such worlds, brief and bright as shooting stars, always ending in darkness when reality caught up. No, I am not your god, she said instead. I am only your queen. If I forget the difference, remind me. Loudly. Tyrion made a small choking sound that might have been a laugh or a sob. Daenerys raised her hand. Bread, she called. Water, bring it. She had not come to this moment without preparing. While stone had been cleared, while bodies had been counted, she had sent riders and ravens south to the Reach and north to the Riverlands both, drafting granaries swollen with last harvest's grain. She had opened the Red Keep storerooms, ordered their contents brought out, counted, and rationed, not by favor, but by head. Now carts creaked forward, pulled by sweating teamsters, piled high with loaves and casks. Unsullied moved among the crowd, not with spears leveled, but with jars in their hands, passing water from lip to cracked, thirsty lip. It was not enough. It would never be enough, but it was a start. Not speeches, Davos said quietly beside her. Food. Good. She glanced at him. Words matter, she said. Hey, he said, but a full belly listens better. He was right. As the first loaves made their way into outstretched hands, as water wet parched tongues, the restless shift of the crowd eased. Some even began to sit on the broken flagstones to eat, as if some part of them had decided that whatever came next could be met better on a stomach not entirely empty. Daenerys watched a boy no older than 7 tear his loaf in half and share it with the filthy girl at his side. She watched an old woman make a careful cross on her crust with a grimy finger before raising it to her mouth. Eyes closed, lips moving in silent thanks. Not to Daenerys, but to whatever god still listened. The gods had not done much so far. Now it was her turn. Grey Worm, she said without looking away from the square. Tell your men, no plunder, no taking what hasn't been given freely in trade. Any man who uses a freed body as if it were still his to own will answer to me, and tell the Dothraki their reward is still coming, but not in this city." The corner of his mouth twitched, almost perplexed. "They do not understand fighting without loot," he said. "Without the taking. They will have their share," Daenerys said. "But not of these people. There is land enough in the Reach that has gone untilled. There are Ironborn along the coasts who have long deserved to feel a scream instead of causing them. I will not let my riders make a feast of a city that has already been chewed half to pieces." "Nagbi, and Namda." Grey Worm inclined his head. "It will be done," he said. He descended the steps, his small figure straight and steady as he moved into the throng of Unsullied at the base. His presence was like a knife cutting through water, quiet, decisive. "Do you think you can keep them leashed?" Jon murmured. She watched as a Dothraki Arak flashed for an instant in the distance, then lowered again under an Unsullied's hard stare. "Not leashed, perhaps. Redirected." "I can try," she said. "They're not dogs. They followed me because they saw something in me they wanted to follow. If they stop seeing it, they'll turn. I'd rather they turn toward a horizon that leads away from these streets." He studied her profile for a long moment. "You're not what I expected," he said at last. "You've said that before," she answered. "I keep having to tell myself it," he said. "Every time some new story about you crawls out of the woodwork." "And what stories will they tell now, I wonder?" Tyrion said. "The Dragon Queen who melted her own chair? I look forward to the songs." "You won't have to listen long," she said. "You'll be busy." He blinked. "You said councils," she reminded him. "Not one. Several. Men and women who can argue with me and with each other about more than whose name goes in what box on a tax scroll. I will need someone who knows the games your lords play. Someone who can read 3 lies, buried under half a truth. Someone who is lost enough to know how much stupidity costs." "No." A hollow amusement flared in his eyes. "You want me for your hand," he said. She thought of visions where she had pinned a brooch on him in this same hall, the hand of the queen, and later wondered if he had poisoned her, or if she had forced him to betray those pieces of his soul he still valued. "I want you as my conscience," she said, "and my liar, and my drinker, and my man who asks, 'Have you thought of this?' at the most inconvenient moments." "It's a poor conscience who got his own family killed," Tyrion said. "It's the best kind," she answered. "One that knows exactly what it's done." He gazed at her, mouth tight. "You will make me choose between blood and what passes for justice," he said. "Between what I want and what you need. I will fail you. Often. Then we'll be even," she said. His breath shuddered out. "Very well," he said. "I will stand between you and your worst impulses, and you will stand between me and mine. I can't promise I'll survive your dragon's temper." "You survived, Cersei," she said. "How much worse can I be?" He gave her a look. "Should I answer honestly?" he asked. "Later," she said, unable to stop a ghost of a smile. The crowd shifted again. Farther back, past the outer ring of red cloaks and gold cloaks, she saw other colors. Green of Tyrell men, ragged brown and gray of river lords, the flaring orange of Martell banners. Ravens had flown fast once the Night King fell. Some lords had ridden faster. They would want to see her. These men and women whose whole lives had been built on the old system she had come to topple. They would want to measure her, to gauge the size of the threat she posed to their comfortable cruelty. Some would bow with their knees and not their hearts. Some would do the reverse. Some would do neither. All of that could be dealt with in time. For now, there was bread and water, and the knowledge that for the first time since Dragonstow's black sails had appeared on their horizon, King's Landing had woken to a day without new fires. That night, sleep came grudgingly. When it did, it brought no visions, no doors, no corridors, no branching futures that folded and refolded like fan work in a Carthene noble's hands. There was only darkness, heavy and still. Somewhere in that dark, A quiet ache pulsed where the Night King's hand had brushed her leg, as if the cold he had sunk into her flesh remembered itself when she let go of waking. She woke with a start, heart racing, hand flying to her thigh. Her skin was smooth. The black and white frostblight that had crawled up her leg in the godswood was gone, burned away by magics no maester would ever understand. Only a faint numbness remained, like the memory of frostbite. She swung her legs out from under the rough borrowed blankets and went to the window. Dawn lay over the city like a promise and a threat both. Smoke still rose in a few places where embers smoldered under collapsed roofs. Beyond those scars, life was already creeping back. She saw women with baskets picking their way through rubble, children scavenging fallen stones, men leading scrawny horses hitched to plows toward patches of earth just beyond the walls. Good enough, she whispered to the emptied room. For now, she dressed without calling for handmaids, choosing simple wool breeches under a plain dress, heavy boots instead of slippers. Silks would come later, if they came at all. Missandei met her in the corridor, notes already organized on a tablet of wood and scraped parchment. "Your council is assembled, Your Grace," she said. "My council." It was still only half formed, a rough circle around the wound in the world that was King's Landing. Tyrion. Davos. Grey Worm. Missandei herself, a black-haired woman named Elena from Fleabottom, sent as a representative by the ragged, suspicious men and women of that maze of alleys. A Tyrell cousin with a careful face and quick tongue. Jon Royce for the Vale. Brienne of Tarth for the Riverlands, sent by Sansa with a letter that read in its entirety, "I trust her more than any other knight. Jon will explain." Jon.A. He waited already in the broken hall where the molten stump of the Iron Throne cooled. He stood by the great dragon skull that had once glowered over the room, his hand resting absently on a horn as long as his arm. Ghost lay at his feet, half asleep. One red eye cracked open. Bran sat a little apart, his chair fitted with wheels fashioned hastily from cart parts and scavenged timber. Arya stood behind him with one shoulder against a pillar, a blade on her hip and half her attention on the shadows in the rafters. They were not part of her council. Not yet. They were something else. The North, braided into human form. "I expected you would still be shouting in the square," Tyrion said as she entered, gesturing with the stub of his wine cup toward a makeshift table. "Or meditating over the molten remains of your chair." "It will keep," she said. "There will be time to make it ugly in a new way later." She took the head of the table without thinking, then caught herself. The room waited. "I am not here to tell you what to do," she said. "Not alone. We all bled for this city. We all have things we want from it, so speak. Tell me what you think must be done now, today, and what can wait." "That list would be shorter," Davos murmured. "Then we start there," she said. The first voices were expected. "Order," Grey Worm said. "We must keep the peace. Unsullied will patrol. Any law we make must be enforced or it is as nothing." "Food," Davos said. "Moon turns, no bread. City riots, you can't eat order." "Water," Elena said, her tone sharp. She was thin as whipcord, with scars along one side of her face that twisted her smile into something fierce. "Plenty of wells cracked. The ones that still run aren't enough for all. You want to stop plague spreading, you get clean water flowing again. Either that or we all shite ourselves to death before winter's even done." "Shelter," Brienne added. "Many houses are gone, others unsafe. Tents can do for a while, but if cold comes again, we'll have problems." "Justice," Jon Royce rumbled. "Your Grace, there are men in this city who followed the Lannisters' every cruelty. Torturers, informers. Some of them will slip away in the confusion unless we act quickly." "Nah. Mercy," Missandei said quietly. "There are also those who trailed in their wake because they feared punishment if they did not. We saw as much in Meereen. Not everyone who survives a bad system is its architect." "Revenge," Arya said, and several heads turned toward her. Her voice was flat. There are those who will not listen to justice or mercy both. They'll want blood. We should decide whose and how much before it spills on its own. Westeros thrives on calculated blood, Tyrion said. Tradition. Spectacle. Something that says, the old way is dead. Here is the body to prove it. Your father died to make room for Robert. Ned Stark died to show that mercy would not be tolerated. The Sept of Baelor burned to remind everyone what defiance earned under Cersei. Jealousy pricked Daenerys, not of the gruesome honors he named, but of how neatly Westerosi history could be summed up in a chain of theatrical killings. And what will we kill to show that my rule is different? She asked. Perhaps that's the wrong question, Bran said, and the room fell still. They had grown unused to his voice. He spoke rarely, and when he did, the words often left an aftertaste like cold iron. Now he looked at Daenerys not as a boy, nor even a man, but as something with one eye always turned inward. You cannot prove a thing is different by doing the same thing harder, he said. You have broken a chair. Good. You are still a point around which power turns. If you want to break the wheel, you must change how power moves. And how do I do that? She asked before she could stop herself. He smiled faintly. By not asking the boy in the chair to answer every question, he said. I can tell you what has happened. I can tell you what might be sometimes. I can't tell you what should be. That is yours. She drew a breath. Very well, she said. Then here is what I think. Order, food, water, shelter, these are immediate. Davos, Elena. Grey Worm. I want a plan by nightfall. Not a perfect one, a workable one. Brienne, help Royce draw up a list of those whose crimes are beyond doubt. Not every Lannister soldier, not every gold cloak, only those who ordered and those who delighted. Find witnesses, names. We will show this city that we do not hang men on rumor and hate alone. Nah. And in the longer term? Tyrion asked. She looked down at the rough table. A map lay there, drawn hastily in charcoal across the scraped wood. 7 kingdoms sketched in broad strokes, the trident like a 3-fingered hand, the neck, the fat, green swell of the reach, the jutting rocks of the Vale. North of the neck, the lines grew less precise, as if whoever had drawn them had found the idea of ice beyond imagining. In Meereen, she said slowly, I tried to be queen of every brick and blade of grass. I tried to sit a throne and hold a whip and sign every order. All it did was tangle me in every cobweb, until I could not move without tearing something. I will not do that here. This city will have its council. The kingdoms will have theirs. You mean to let us rule ourselves? Jon Royce asked, incredulous. Within bounds, she said. You know your lands better than I do, or than I ever will. But there are lines you will not cross. No slaves, no mass murder for convenience, no burning men in God's names, no starving your people to feed your pride. And if a lord does, Arya asked, then he will find that dragons fly better than ravens, she said. And if your dragons become the very thing we fear, Tyrion murmured. Drogon's shadow shifted beyond the broken wall, vast even in partial silhouette. Then you will need something that can kill dragons, she said. The silence that followed was not exactly comfortable. I am not asking you to trust me blindly, she went on. You have seen what blind trust in kings brings. I'm asking you to build a world where no one can burn it all alone. Not me, not whoever comes after me, not any one of you. No. Jon had been silent all this while, arms folded, leaning against a cracked column. What do you want, Jon? She asked, turning to him. Now that the dead are dead, and this city is yours to hate or love. He stared at her for a heartbeat. I want to go home, he said. To Winterfell? Tyrion asked. To somewhere that isn't full of ghosts, Jon said. The North needs time to mend, to remember how to live without waiting for ice in every shadow. I'm not a governor, or a counselor. I'm a swordsman who's lived too long. No, me. You're also something else, Bran said softly. Jon shot him a sharp look. No, he said. Yes, Bran went on, unperturbed. You are the son of Rhaegar Targaryen and Lyanna Stark, born in the Tower of Joy, named Aegon, hidden to keep you from Robert's wrath. The words fell into the room like stones into a still pool. Daenerys felt her heart thrash in her chest. She had known, in some part of herself. The visions had shown her not just his face but his blood, a line of fire twisting north through Winterfell's cold ancestries. She had felt, in how the dragons watched him, an echo of something shared. Hearing it said aloud was different. Bran, Sansa had written in one of the letters that had intercepted their armies on their way south. Sees truths no one else can. Be careful what you ask him. She had not asked. He had told. Jon closed his eyes briefly. I never wanted it, he said. That doesn't make it less true, Bran replied. Sam found it in some book, Jon said, as if hoping to undermine his own claim. Some maester's scribbling. Rhaegar had his marriage to Elia Martell annulled and married his throat worked. Married Lyanna, by the laws of gods and men, as they say. That makes me. It makes you my nephew, Daenerys said, hearing the strained calm in her own voice. He met her gaze. I'm not your enemy, he said. I know, she said. Did she? She knew half a dozen futures where he had been. Blades and looks and words all used as weapons. Some of them at her own prompting. Some in desperate response to her worst self. Those selves lingered like smoke, but she remembered other paths too. Ones where they had trusted, where they had stood back to back before a tidal wave of dead, where they had chosen each other over every whispered prophecy about prince or princess. She forced herself to breathe. Does anyone else know? She asked. Sam? Bran? Me? Sansa and Arya? Jon said, mouth tightening. Oh, and probably half the ravens in the north by now. Secrets don't stay buried in snow. Varys knew, Tyrion said quietly. In another life, at least. It was the kind of thing he dug up the moment it existed. If he were here, he'd already be composing a speech about how the realm deserves a king with the right name more than a queen with dragons. No, he is not here, Daenerys said. In one path, she had burned him alive on this very hillside, dragon fire taking him as cleanly as any worshipper ever asked for. In this one, he had died on Dragonstone under a wave of green fire when a cask of stored wildfire, leftover madness from Aerys' day or Cersei's, had gone up in a freak strike of lightning, taking half a tower with it. She had wondered then if some faceless god resented her stealing its role. If the realm hears this, Royce said now, they'll want him instead of you. I know, Daenerys said. You would give it up? Missandei asked softly. After all you have done to reach this shore. The memory of every road behind her pressed in then, every door she had opened, every life she had half lived in the house of the undying. In one, she had spilled Jon's secret herself when it suited her, wielding it like a dagger. In another, she had ordered him silenced. In a third, she had stepped aside, fled back across the sea and watched Westeros tear itself apart over his name. All of those possibilities clenched like fists inside her. I will not give the realm a king who does not want to be one, she said. We have had enough of those, and I will not cling to this chair, she nodded at the melted metal, like a child to a toy because I fear a name. Let the lords know. Let them decide whether they think he is more fit to sit on something that no longer exists than I am to build something new. Jon stared. You're mad, he said. Possibly, she said. But at least it's my own madness, not someone else's script. Tyrion made a low sound. You realize what you're inviting, he said. A council. A great council. All the lords of Westeros dragged into one smoky hall to shout each other hoarse over who should sit where. Wars have started over less. Better they shout at each other under a roof Then send men to die in their stead on fields, Daenerys said. If the price of breaking the wheel is more talking, I will pay it. Arya shifted her weight against the pillar. And if they choose someone else, she asked. Not him. Not you. Someone with their own dragons and ghosts? None. Then I will live with the world I have made, Daenerys said, and decide what to do in it. She felt oddly calm. It was as if some band around her chest, drawn tight since the day Viserys had placed a hand on her small head and called her my ticket back, had finally snapped. For so long, this throne, this idea, had been the invisible weight on every scale she used to weigh her actions. Now it lay in a cooling puddle behind her. What remained was men and women, and hunger and fear and stubbornness and hope. I'll call it, she said. In this city, when the snows melt enough for men to ride without freezing their arses off, we'll give the lords and ladies of these lands a few months to glare at their new queen and their old ghosts, then invite them to come shout where we can hear them. Tyrion rubbed his temples. I'll need more wine, he muttered. You'll have it, she said. But not today. Today there's work. Work there was. In the weeks that followed, King's Landing became something it had not been in anyone's memory. A place where rebuilding mattered more than intrigue. Carts of stone rumbled through the streets. Masons set to work on the most damaged sections of the walls. Carpenters patched roofs where they could, tore down what could not be saved, shored up beams that had sagged. Smiths worked day and night, mending buckles, reforging bent swords into plowshares when Dany could bully them into it. The Dothraki sulked until she found them something better than looting. There are fields in the Reach lying fallow, she told their khals, riding out among them at the edge of the city where they'd made their camp, their horses stamping in impatience. Houses burned in the war with the Lannisters. Cattle taken or killed. Men dead. They will pay in grain and gold for men who can ride and fight raiders off while they sow and harvest. Men? Farmers, sniffed one cow with a plume of horsehair as white as his scarred face. You want us to guard dirt and shovels. I want you to take what you're best at. Riding fast, fighting hard, scaring every man who sees your braids, and point it at people who actually deserve to fear you, she said. You can have a share of whatever the farmers grow. You can have the pick of the best horses they breed. Or you can sit here outside a city where the only work is hauling stones and watching walls. Which sounds better? Yeah. Murmurs broke out in the gathered ring. She caught one or two mutters of brown lands for brown men, and remembered a door in the undying house where she had seen the Dothraki sweep green Westerosi fields, burning and pillaging. This was that. Twisted, turned on its side. You will be far from me, she said. You will be able to do what you like in the lands you watch. If you displease the farmers, they will send ravens south. If you do well, they will send more coin and more calls. Nentermia, ow. You set us loose, said one. I set you a task, she said. Whether you do it as beasts or men is up to you. In the end, more riders chose to go than she'd expected. Some left because they were restless. Some because they remembered how the grass had smelled under their horses' hooves in the open lands of Essos and wanted something like it again. Some because they had seen their Khaleesi become something neither war queen nor city ruler and did not know what to make of it. Grey worms unsullied took over the city. They posted at gates, at granaries, at water cisterns. They walked the streets in pairs, spears at their shoulders, shields at rest. They broke up fights, not by drawing blood, but by simply being there. Gray walls between passions. They did not drink, did not whore, did not steal. King's Landing had never had such disciplined peacekeepers. They hate you, Elena told Grey Worm bluntly one afternoon, watching as two unsullied led a struggling Goldcloak to a holding yard. The old lot. The ones who got fat off the chaos. They hate you because you don't listen when they shout who they are. Menda. They all look the same in line, Grey Worm said. His common had grown more fluent, but his accent still carved each word into its own little block. Under red cloak, under gold cloak, under silk. Men who hurt others for power smell the same. There'll be trouble, Elena went on. Give it a month, less. Some lordling or merchant prince will raise a fuss about foreign soldiers on his cobbles and try to stir up a riot. If they do, Grey Worm said, we will be here. He looked at Daenerys across the square. And after? He asked. When the city stands again? When there is less need for soldiers? You will send us away. He did not fear battle. That much was clear. But there was something more cautious in his voice now. Like a man who had spent his whole life being one thing, and did not know what to be without it. In some lives, I keep you here until you rot, Daenerys thought. In some, I send you to die for a vengeance that is not really yours. In some, I let you choose, and you end up on a green island far from this continent, chasing butterflies with a woman you love until war finds you even there. No, I won't throw you away, she said aloud, or keep you chained. When this city can stand on its own feet without so many spears, you will choose. Some of you will stay, if you wish. Some can go back across the sea. There are people in Neath who should not have to fight to walk their own shores. There are cities in the bay that will still need guarding. I will not pretend I do not need you. But I will not pretend you exist only to be pointed at things for me. Manda. He inclined his head. Missandei's eyes shone briefly where she stood a little behind him. Finally, when the first fragile veins of green began to show in the blackened cracks of the city's burned gardens, when the snow in the alleys had shrunk to dirty, stubborn patches, when crows had picked the last flesh from the dead left beyond the walls, the riders began to arrive. The Great Council was not so great as its name implied. Some lords refused the summons outright. Some sent terse replies about dark rumors of dragonfire and foreign whore queens. Some simply ignored it. Their ravens never returned. Their decisions written instead in how many men they kept on their own walls. But enough came to matter. Edmure Tully, freed from his Frey prison, his shoulders a little more stooped than the last time anyone had seen him trying and failing to string a longbow. Gendry Baratheon, no longer just a boy from the forge, wearing a stag and hammer on his surcoat, and looking as if he expected someone to wake him from a joke at any moment. Sansa Stark, riding south with a train of Northmen whose eyes were as cold as the lands they'd left, flanked by knights of the Vale and polished steel. Yara Greyjoy, Salt Tang still clinging to her, a kraken sewn in black on her breast. Samwell Tarly, who had never been a lord before, and walked like a man in mail 2 sizes too big. Others followed. Manderless, Hightowers, Carons and Conningtons and Blackwoods and Brackens. Some minor houses whose names Alex had never even heard, their sigils fresh painted, brought not so much by duty as by curiosity. They came on horses and mules, in carriages and litters, in chain shirts and robes. King's Landing swelled and strained around them. Daenerys had them housed not in the old brothels hastily converted into barracks during wartime, nor in the grandest manses left empty by dead Lannisters, but in a mixture of both. Let them sleep on mattresses that had seen both silks and straw. She held the council in the dragon pit. We stand in the bones of old certainty, she told them when they assembled beneath its ruined dome. Dragons' shadows moving flicker soft along cracked stone. Once, this was where men held beasts in chains for their own glory. It seems a fitting place to talk about what comes after. They took their places on benches rebuilt from broken beams, forming a rough circle around the center pit. There was no throne, no dais, only a flat piece of stone where anyone who wished could stand and speak. Some took to it eagerly. A north that governs itself, Sansa said, rising with the ease of one who had grown used to eyes on her. We bled for this war. We did our part. We will not be governed by someone sitting in a tower in this city again. Not you, Your Grace. Her eyes met Daenerys, cool but not hostile. Not anyone. A north that governs itself but sends food when the south starves, Daenerys answered. We will all depend on each other. Winter has taught us that if nothing else, you may have your own laws, not your own mercy. Sansa's mouth curved wryly. Little enough of that in Winterfell, she said. But we can talk. Others were less direct. Lord Glover spoke of tradition until Daenerys' eyes crossed. A Hightower cousin muttered about ancient rites and the faith. A Tyrell child, the last of his line, sat silent beside an uncle who did the shouting for both. Tyrion watched it all, keeping tally with quick, sharp glances. You're giving them a taste, he said in an aside during one of the lulls, as a minor lord declaimed at length about dock taxes. Of having a say. Enough to make them feel invested, not enough to decide anything you cannot live with. I am letting them hear the sound of their own voices in a hall where dragons sit, she said. If they think this was all my idea, they will resent it forever. If they believe, in some small corner of their hearts, that they shouted themselves into it, they'll resent themselves instead, he finished. Resentment is a luxury, she said. They can nurse it at home with a full belly. In the end, it was not a single vote that settled the question of who would govern, but an accretion of choices. Some lords argued for a council that would choose a new monarch whenever the old died, like electing a pope every generation. Some wanted to go back to old bloodlines. A few suggested tearing the realm apart, 7 kingdoms again, 8, 9, each with their own petty crown. Too many crowns, Davos said quietly. I have only so many fingers to count them on, and I've already lost a few. What we need is something that can flex, Samwell Tarly said, surprising himself as much as anyone. His face flushed red as soon as he realized he had the floor, but he plowed on. A king or queen for now, yes. Someone to sign what needs signing, to break ties, to stand as the face of the realm. But under them, a council chosen not just by lords, but by towns, by guilds, by small folk, suggested Elena, eyebrows arched. Yes, he said. Them, us. People who know what it is to go without, to live with decisions made far away. Murmurs rose. It'll never work, Lord Glover muttered. You let fishwives think their voices weigh as much as a lord's, and you'll hear nothing but squawking. You fear squawking because it drowns your own, Daenerys said mildly. It will be chaos, someone else said. It already is, she replied. In the end, they agreed to an experiment. A queen named there before all, Daenerys of House Targaryen, Stormborn, breaker of chains, etc., etc., etc. But with her power bound by rot and wood and ink, by a charter written on dragonstone and hammered into the walls of this hall and others like it. Under her, a council drawn partly from the great houses, partly from appointed representatives of the towns and guilds. Every 10 years, those seats would be renewed. Lords would remain lords, small folk small folk. She was not about to pretend she could uproot feudalism in a season. But it was a wedge, a crack in stone. What if some later king burns this charter? That Hightower cousin asked suspiciously as the maesters wrote in fine, cramped hands. Then I will be dead, and it will be your problem, Daenerys said. But the more you tie yourselves to it now, the harder it will be to tear up without tearing your own power with it. You're very good at tying knots, Tyrion observed. I've seen enough of them, she said. Jon refused every title they offered him. King in the North, they said. Prince of Winterfell, Lord Protector, Co-Regent. He shook his head at each. I've worn enough crowns, he said. They sit heavy. Give them to someone who cares for them. Who then? Sansa asked, in the quiet of a half-ruined solar where they had once played as children. Bran, he said. She frowned. He cannot sire heirs, she said. He cannot ride. He cannot fight. He can see, Jon said. He can listen. He can remember. And he will not want more than that. Let him be our Lord of Winterfell. Let the North look to him when it must. When he dies, we will choose another. Not a boy because of an accident of birth. Sansa looked at her brother. No, her cousin, in his chair, his eyes distant. "You're giving him a cage," she said. "He lives in one already," Jon said. "At least this one has windows." When she looked at Bran, she saw a flicker of something like amusement under the ice of his gaze. "This is one of the gentler paths," he said later to Daenerys, when she found him in the godswood of the Red Keep, a pathetic little imported weirwood in a corner garden, its red leaves dusted with ash. "I've walked more than one mile to this place. You and Jon both. In most of them, one of you dies by the other's hand. In a few, both do. In fewer still, you each walk away from thrones you thought you wanted." "No." She sat on a charred bench, the dragon pit's ruined dome a dark hump against the sky beyond the wall. "Why show me all that in Qarth?" she asked. "Why pour them into me until I thought I would break? That was you, wasn't it? Watching through their candles, or whatever those corpses used." "Partly," he said. "Partly the Undying themselves. They wanted you bound. I wanted you prepared." "For this?" She gestured vaguely, encompassing the city, the council, the charter. "For the knowledge that no choice you made would be clean," he said. "That whatever road you took would be paved with bones. You needed to see that, or you would have believed that any compromise meant failure." "And now?" she asked. "Do you see more doors?" He shook his head, a small, slow motion. "Fewer," he said. "You burned some of them. The Night King was a knot that tied many threads. Cutting him changed the weave. The world feels lighter, less fixed." "That frightens you," she said. "Freedom always does," he answered. On a morning several weeks after the council ended, a ship left King's Landing harbor with no banners flying. At its rails stood Missandei of Neath, her hands resting on the smoothed wood. Grey Worm stood beside her, his posture as straight in departure as it had been in battle. Behind them along the deck, ranks of Unsullied stood in lighter armor, shields stacked, spears bundled. "You could stay," Daenerys had said the night before, in the quiet of a narrow tower room where the sea could be heard but not seen. "Have a command here, a house, a life." "Neath is my life," Missandei said. "Or it would have been, if not for slavers. I would like to see who I might have been there, even if it means finding I am someone else now." "And you?" Daenerys had asked Grey Worm. His eyes had slid briefly toward Missandei. "I was made to follow orders," he said. "No longer. Now I choose. I choose this." She had not argued. Now, as the ship's sails swelled with wind and the city receded behind them, Missandei lifted a hand. Daenerys stood on the quay with a small knot of people. She raised her hand in answer. Behind her, she heard Elena sniff. "Even the good ones leave," the woman muttered. "That's how cities stay rotten. Anyone who learns to dream bigger than the next meal goes off to chase it somewhere else, leaves the rest to stew." "They'll come back," Daenerys said. "When?" "When they're ready," she said. "When we are." Elena snorted. "I'll believe it when I see it," she said. "In the meantime, there's a busted sewer near the fish market that'll drown half the district if we don't fix it before the next big rain. Your Grace." Daenerys smiled faintly. "A sewer, then," she said. "Of course." Years passed. Not many. Enough. Enough for Drogon to grow vast, his wings spanning half a courtyard when he stretched them, his shadow covering whole streets when he flew overhead. Enough for Rhaegal and Viserion to match him in length if not bulk, their colors bright against gray skies. She did not use them often in war. There were skirmishes, of course. Ironborn raiders who did not like Yara Greyjoy's new ideas about reaving less and fishing more, who set up in broken forts along the coasts and tried to revive the old way of salt and screams. A band of mercenaries in the Stormlands who carved out a petty kingdom with stolen banners and too many swords. A would-be king in the Westerlands who gathered disgruntled lions and tried to unfurl a golden standard over Lannisport. Each time, she flew. Not to burn entire castles, but to take the heart out of the threat. "You don't show them all your fire," Sir Brienne said once, watching from a far hill as Drogon swept down over a bandit-held tower, his flame a narrow, precise lance that turned the offending banner to drifting cinders without collapsing the keep. You show them enough. Strange as it is to say, dragons are a deterrent, Tyrion added. You're making them part of the realm's balance instead of its breaker. They broke enough in the past, she said. Sometimes when she flew, she saw flashes. Not visions, not in the old, overwhelming sense, but shards. The way this same tower would look if she loosed her dragon wholly, the way these same men would lie if she chose slaughter instead of sending them to the wall that was no longer the wall. The Night's Watch had been reduced, reformed, not abolished. There were still wildlings who needed mediating, smugglers who needed watching, old tunnels that needed guarding. But the old oaths had been rewritten. I am the shield that guards the realms of men now meant more than one realm, more than one kind of man. Jon Snow had gone there after all. I can't sit in your council, he'd said. I'm no good at rules, or is it oaths? Either way, I'm better where the land is simple and the problems are not. Dead men were simple, she'd asked. They wanted to kill everything, he'd said. Easier to understand than lords. Now he walked the length of the new lower wall and the lands beyond it with Tormund and others, keeping peace between wildlings who had moved south and crannogmen who eyed them warily. Letters came sometimes. Short ones. Snow's melting. Good. Saw a girl stare down a white skull and laugh. Better. How's the city? She wrote back in equal measure. Still stinks. No one's burned it down yet. You'd hate the talk and love the bread? Once, she added. Bran says hello. He also says you'd better wear your cloak at night. He sees a cough in your future if you don't. The reply came 3 weeks later. One line. Tell Bran to mind his own throats. On another spring, with the Bay of Dragons winds now warmer, and the last of the old masters fading from their positions in councils along those shores, Daenerys sailed east again. She came not to reclaim, but to return. Astapor's red bricks were less stained. Meereen's harpy head had grown moss, and had begun to crumble in the corner of its square. The council she had left, unsullied, freedmen, former masters, priests, had not ruled perfectly. There had been bribery, faction fighting, 2 small stupid wars with Yunkai that had accomplished nothing but fill graveyards and empty coffers. But no new slave markets had opened. In the shadow of Meereen's great pyramid, a woman with a scar like a twisted rope down her arm held out a small copper coin to her. It bore the softened impression of a whip on one side and a dragon head on the other. We melted the rest, the woman said. This one we kept, to remind us. Good and bad, what you did, what we did after. Good and bad, Daenerys repeated, weighing the coin on her palm. It was surprisingly light. You taught us to choose, the woman said. You left before we were ready. We cursed you for that. And yet, if you had stayed, we might have never learned how to live without you. So thank you and damn you both, I suppose. I'll take that, Daenerys said. On the last leg of the journey, she went alone. No unsullied, no advisors, no dragons. Just herself, in a plain dress, a cloak with the hood drawn up, and one small skiff hired from a Braavosi with more curiosity than sense. You sure you don't want an escort, my lady? He had asked, one hand on the tiller, the other flicking ash from his pipe into the dark water of the canal. The streets get rougher where you're headed. I grew up in them, she said. He laughed, thinking she was joking. The house with the red door was smaller than she remembered. The paint had faded further, flakes curling at the edges. The lion's head knocker had lost one ear. The lemon tree in the little courtyard over the wall was taller, its branches reaching over into the lane. Leaves dusted with soot. Her heart beat like a frightened bird. For a moment it seemed she stood in 10 doors at once. The child in Braavos who had stared at this door and thought it was the whole world. The queen who had dreamed of it fervently in a black tent in the red waste. The Khaleesi who had seen another life where she had never left it and woken with both grief and relief. Somewhere, in some path that had once been possible, A version of her had grown up behind this door and never thought of dragons except in stories. That girl might still exist, or she might have been burned away when the Night King broke, when the Undying died, when Drogon's fire turned prophecy to steam. No way to know. She raised her hand. For a long moment she hovered there, fingers a breath from the wood. Then she let them fall to her side. Not today. She did not need to knock. She could imagine enough. A woman baking bread. A child running through the little courtyard. Lemons overhead. The creak of floorboards at night. Laughter and tears in equal measure. A life. Not hers. She turned away. As she walked back toward the canal, she felt lighter with each step. Behind her, the door stayed closed. Ahead, the city's noise rose. Shouts, the slap of water, the mutter and sing-song of 100 tongues. Above it all, faint and distant but unmistakable, a dragon's roar echoed across the water, carried all the way from Dragonstone where her children wheeled. The world went on. It would go on without her someday. She had seen futures where she died in fire, in ice, in childbirth, in her bed of old age, with grandchildren at her feet. She no longer knew which of those doors remained open. Perhaps none. Perhaps all, in some fashion. It did not matter as much as it had. What mattered was this step, and the next. In Korth, the Undying had tried to bind her to a tapestry woven before she was born. They had shown her every thread, every knot, every snarl, and told her she was only the shuttle. They had not understood that knowing all the ways a road could twist did not oblige her to walk it. Daenerys Stormborn of House Targaryen walked down a Braavosi alley, past a lemon tree and a red door, toward a waiting boat in a world still half broken and half mending, with dragons in its sky and charter in its halls and ghosts in its corners. The future spread out before her, not as a corridor of doors, but as open ground. The ground was rough. She stepped onto it anyway. The mist on the canal rose like breath. By the time Daenerys reached the little skiff, the morning had grown brighter, the fog thinning to tatters above the water. The Braavosi boatman pinched his pipe between yellowed teeth and squinted at her from under bushy brows. "Find what you were looking for, my lady?" he asked. She stepped in, the wood rocking beneath her. "I found that I didn't need to enter to know what's behind a door," she said. He chuckled, pushing off from the moss-slick steps with a pole. "Wise. Most folk only learn that after they open a few, they wish they'd left shut." The skiff slid into the canal's slow current. Buildings leaned over them, their upper stories nearly touching across the water in places, turning the world into a narrow ribbon of sky. Wash lines drooped between windows, the smell of baking bread and frying fish and stale piss mixed in the air. Somewhere, a woman laughed. A man cursed in a language Daenerys did not recognize. She sat with her hands folded in her lap, watching the city slide by. There was a time when these lanes had been endless to her, a maze of stone and shadow. Now, they felt small. Not in size, but in weight. Braavos mattered here, in its tangled streets and in the counting houses that quietly lent coin to kings. Beyond that, the world had grown larger than she could have imagined as a girl staring at the red door and wondering what lay past it. "Back to your ship, then," the boatman asked as they turned into a broader channel where barges clustered like fat, lazy fish. "Yes," she said. "Back to mine." It was not vanity, calling the fleet hers. The dragon sigil flew from more than one mast in the harbor. Some of the ships had been bought with Astapori gold, some had been given in token of fealty by lords who could not send men. Some had been built in secret by dockyards that did not want their Lannister masters to know where their loyalties were drifting. She climbed the gangplank of the flagship with the ease of long practice. The salt smell hit her like an old friend. Above, Drogon circled once, then dropped to perch on the highest mast, making the timbers groan. Rhaegal and Viserion took their accustomed places along the yard arms. "Welcome back, Your Grace," Davos said, coming to meet her. His beard was flecked with more white than the last time they'd sat across a table, but his eyes were as wry as ever. "No mysterious disappearances?" No faceless men stepping out of alleys? If any watched me, they chose not to step out, she said. Bravos is like any other city. It has ghosts and knives and people who believe their way is the only one that matters. Sounds like home, he said, glancing back toward the west, where the sea ran gray to the horizon. How fares that home? She asked. They spoke in low voices as the crew made ready to sail. Ropes creaked. Sails unfurled with heavy snaps. Orders flew. The ship's hull shuddered as it caught the wind. In better shape than it was, Davos said. In worse shape than it should be. King's Landing still half rubble in some quarters, but the worst of the stink is gone. No new plagues, no mass hangings without trial. That's something. And the charter? He snorted. Half the lords grumble that it's a noose for their privileges, he said. The other half grumble that it doesn't go far enough. The small folk think it's a fancy piece of parchment that'll be ignored as soon as the last dragon dies. Which, to be fair, is how most parchments go. No, then we should make the dragons live very long, she said. He eyed the black curve of Drogon's tail against the sky. Hey, he said. Or make the parchment matter before they don't. The sea opened around them. Bravos shrank to a smudge behind. Gulls wheeled above. The dragons complained at the lack of anything interesting to burn, then turned their attention to the waves, snapping at shoals of silver fish that scattered just ahead of their talons. On the second day, a raven found them. It dropped onto the rigging with an indignant croak, black wings beating the salt air. Its leg bore a strip of parchment wrapped in waxed thread. The captain whistled for a boy, who clambered up the ratlines and retrieved it with practiced fingers. For you, your grace, Davos said, offering the unfurled scrap. The handwriting was small and cramped, the ink blotted in places where the quill had hesitated. The city held a trial without you. Tyrion insisted. Sansa agreed. I thought you should know. Cersei Lannister is dead. So is Jaime. The worst of their men, too. The rest saw what happens when a queen listens to the people she's wronged and not just to the nobles who want blood. The charter held. Come home soon. Jay. Daenerys read it twice. Trial, she murmured. Davos rubbed his neck. Tyrion said something about that before you left, he said. That some folk needed to see the old beast buried proper, not just behind closed doors and whispers. Who stood? She asked. It wasn't exactly a trial in the old sense, he said. No crown, no judge on a high chair. More of a telling. What the Lannisters did. What Robert did. What your father did. Have the wronged folks speak. Hear them. Hear them. Then decide what the realm means to do, going forward. None. And what did it decide? She asked. That the dead don't profit from hanging twice, Davos said. That the living need more than corpses to hang their hate on. That seems to be Tyrion's way of thinking these days. She folded the parchment. In some paths, she had insisted on spectacles. Her father burned in songs and stories, and she had longed, in the fierce, childish place that still remembered his shadow as a rumor, to see his killers made to kneel in the same square where his wildfire visions had almost burst the city apart. Cersei's fall in those lives had been fire and theater, and the sound of a woman's scream ringing from spire to spire. Here, the woman had died buried in rubble. The theater had come after. Good, she said. Then perhaps when the next tyrant falls, we can spend less time on how and more on what comes next. You're assuming there'll be another, Davos said. There is always another, she answered. Sometimes she wears my face. He slanted her a look. You think you're the next tyrant? He asked. I think there's a version of me in some other door who is, she said. Or who might yet be, if enough things go wrong. It's easier to count all the ways I could fall now. Harder to pretend any of them are impossible. He was silent for a moment, watching the spray fly from the bow. Knowing how you might break doesn't mean you will, he said. It makes it harder to lie to myself when I feel the cracks start, she said. He nodded slowly. That, he said, is worth something. When they reached Dragonstone, the island greeted her with its familiar mix of smoke and wind. She had not seen it in almost a year. It had weathered the time with its usual stubbornness. The carved dragons that lined the causeway's approach were more worn. Sea spray had eaten another layer from their scales. The courtyards were busier. Smiths worked in sheds where once only ravens had nested. Men and women in plain wool and rough leather moved with purpose from forge to storage to dock. They cheered when she stepped ashore. Not all. There were those who watched in silence, wary, like creatures that had been beaten too often to come forward easily for kindness. But enough raised their fists or their voices or their mugs. The sound rolled up the black stone like a wave. Lady Daenerys, Dragon Queen, mother of the bread, someone shouted from the back, and there was laughter. It was good laughter. Rough, ordinary. Not the brittle sound of courtiers who laughed because the alternative was dangerous. It seems they've taken to you, Davos said. They've taken to the dragon that melted their taxes, she said. One of the first things she'd decreed, after her coronation that had not quite been a coronation, had been a restructure of the crown's levies. Not abolition. Castles did not patch themselves and roads did not repair their own ruts, but a shift. Less grain taken when harvests were thin, more coin demanded when ships came fat from heavy trade. No more selling offices to the highest bidder. No more toll at every bridge. She had expected more resistance from the men who benefited most. There had been some. Quiet, undermining. Loud complaints. A long, tense stretch when it looked as if the Reach would simply refuse to send its grain south. Then one of their storehouses had caught fire of its own accord, and Rhaegal's silhouette had been seen against the smoke, and suddenly the letter that followed had been much more cooperative. Fear still worked. She simply used it less bluntly. Tyrion met her in the Great Hall of Dragonstone. You chose the better weather, he said, pouring wine for them both with his one good hand. While you were gone, we had 3 storms and 1 small riot over the price of onions. Believe me, you'd rather face the storms. Onions hurt more? She asked. Onions blame more, he said. Nature just smashes things and moves on. People remember who charged them extra for the last bite they had before the smashing. He looked older, Daenerys thought. Not in the lines of his face, those had always been there, carved by wine and worry, but in the way he held his shoulders. No longer hunched against blows that might fall at any moment, but bearing a load he did not ever expect to put down again. What did I miss? She asked. He handed her a stack of folded parchments. Small things, he said. A dispute over fishing rights between Blackwater villages. A flood in the riverlands that ruined more stored grain than we can lightly afford to lose. A priest of the 7 who insists your dragons are a sign of the stranger and wants to preach in the square about the end of days. Let him, she said, flipping through the pages. If people hear enough about endings, they might start thinking how to live between them. I did, Tyrion said. He's very popular. She glanced up. That doesn't worry you? She asked. Of course it worries me, he said. Everything worries me. But telling priests they're not allowed to talk is how you end up with them talking in secret instead. And then you have heresy, which is just belief with better stories. Which is just belief with better stories. And the flood? She asked. We've rerouted grain from the south, he said. Enough to keep the riverlands from starving. Not enough to keep their lords from complaining. They say they fed half the realm during the war. They're not wrong. Nunda. We'll have to find something they need that the rest of the realm has, she said. Trade softens resentments where words don't. Spoken like someone who grew up watching men haggle over 1 cracked egg, he said. She smiled thinly. That, or someone who has listened to too many of your lectures on the value of wine tariffs, she said. He raised his cup. To wine tariffs, he said solemnly, and to queens who care about them. She read until the candles burned low, eyes skimming line after line of ink. It would have been easy once to dismiss such matters as beneath her. A woman who had walked through fire and seen the faces of her unborn children in her dreams did not need to concern herself with flooded fields and onion prices. The House of the Undying had cured her of that. She had seen too many worlds end in slow, stupid ways, not with dragon fire or ice spears, but with rot, with neglect, with small men hoarding what should have been shared until resentment swelled like a boil and burst into something that gave poets metaphors for centuries. "You do realize," Tyrion said finally, closing his own ledger with a snap, "that most of your subjects see only the dragons. If they saw my table, they would run screaming," she said. "Perhaps that's for the best. You could let others carry more of this," he said carefully. "You have a council, delegates, people who would happily spend their lives arguing about fish and tariffs so you don't have to." "I do let them," she said. "Some of it. But I need my hands in the clay too. If I turn away from it entirely, the clay becomes someone else's statue. And then one morning I wake to find I've been built into something with teeth. No, yeah." He rubbed his temples again. "There are days," he said, "when I think you're the only person in the realm who worries about becoming a monster." "Then you had a very sheltered childhood," she said. News from Neath came with the spring. The letter was written in Missandei's steady hand, the script precise and small, the words arranged with care. "The butterflies returned after the winter. The old sickness is still here. It took 3 of our men in the first month. They died quickly. The locals tell us some die slowly. We have begun to learn which herbs help and which do not. Grey Worm will not leave. When someone coughs, he is at their side. When someone sweats, he is there with water. He looks more afraid facing a fever he cannot fight with a spear than he ever did facing slavers. We have taught the children to read. They teach us their songs. They are very loud. There are still ships that come to take people. We have burned 2. The 3rd turned away when it saw the spears on the beach and the flag we raised. They do not call it the Bay of Butterflies anymore. They call it the Bay of Spears. If you visit, bring lemon cakes. I want to see Grey Worm's face when he tries them." Daenerys smiled, the expression creasing lines at the corners of her eyes she had not noticed forming. "Good," she murmured. She pictured Missandei sitting under a tree heavy with bright-winged butterflies, children clustered around her, Grey Worm standing at the edge of the clearing like a living wall. Slavers' ships drifting on the horizon, watching the shoreline with wary eyes, not because a god had cursed it, but because men had chosen to defend it. The door in which no one came and took Missandei's head on a wall in King's Landing felt further away than it ever had. The dragons grew. With their growth came new worries. "They are not dogs," Tyrion reminded her one evening as they watched Drogon drop from the clouds onto a hillside, 4 cows hanging limp from his claws, their blood painting the grass red in a sloppy arc. "They cannot be trained to fetch and heal and stay off the chairs. The bigger they get, the more the realm will wonder when they will overstep your hand. Or when someone else's hand will try to turn them. Nah. We've kept them from cities," she said. "Except in war. They hunt in the wild. They sleep on Dragonstone's cliffs. What more can I do?" "Teach others to ride," he said. She turned to him sharply. "Absolutely not," she said. "I know how many of myself died falling from a dragon's back. I won't spread that risk around for the sake of making sure no one points at you and says, 'See, she alone holds the power.'" Tyrion said, "You want to break a wheel. You cannot break it and then stand at the center holding the largest spoke." "Nay." She stared at the dragons. Drogon tore one of the cows in half with a casual shake of his head. Bone crunched. In Korth, the Undying had called her Daughter of Death, Slayer of Worlds. They had seen only what she could destroy, not what she could build. "I will not give them to any lord who asks because his name is old and his pride is wounded," she said. "Or because he wants a toy to frighten his enemies." "Then don't," Tyrion said. "Give them to those who have earned your trust, those who will love them, Those who will teach their children that dragons are not crowns, but burdens. Nah. She thought of Jon, of how Drogon had lowered his head for him without being asked, steam from his breath curling around the man as if testing his scent, of how Jon's hand had lain on the black scales, unafraid, wondering. He would say no, she said. Then don't ask him first, Tyrion said. Ask someone who will say yes and learn from their mistakes. Then ask him. She thought of Arya's face, lit from below by the fire in Winterfell's great hall, shadows carving her features into something older and younger than her years as she told Daenerys, with a certain grim satisfaction, how she had ended the life of the Night King in one of Bran's earlier visions. She thought of Sansa's steady, unflinching gaze, of Bran's distant one, of a fair-haired boy in the Reach who had trembled when Drogon flew overhead and then stepped forward anyway to stroke Viserion's muzzle. You're not suggesting handing one to a child, she said. I'm suggesting, Tyrion said, that if dragons are to be part of this realm's future beyond you, they must learn more than one voice. Jon's, yours. Maybe in time others. Or else one day people will look up and see only symbols again, not creatures. And symbols are easier to turn into monsters. She was silent a long time. In her dreams that night she stood not in a corridor of doors, but in a field of tall grass. Dragons wheeled overhead, larger than hills, their scales casting shadows that turned the world from day to dusk with each pass. Men and women stood beneath them. Some held their hands up in fear. Some in worship. Some in expectation. Only a few held them up in acknowledgement. She woke with her decision made. The first new rider was not a lord. It was Elena. You're mad, she said flatly when Daenerys told her. You call me that often, Daenerys said. Yet, you still sit in my council. I sit because someone has to remind you that wet boots are worse than half the laws you pass, Elena said. I'll not be burned out of my boots just because you've decided dragons need more friends. You've been staring at Rhaegal for months, Daenerys said. Don't deny it. You go up to the roof under pretense of checking leaks, and spend half the time watching him sun himself. He sniffs the air for you when you're near. You're not fooling anyone. He's a big lizard who thinks I smell of fish, Elena said. That's all. He thinks you smell like someone who speaks truth, Daenerys said. Dragons like that. They're simple that way. They hate lies. Then why does he like you? Elena asked. You've lied plenty. Any ruler who says she doesn't lie is worse than one who admits she does. I lie to others, Daenerys said. Less to myself now. Perhaps he can tell. No. Elena chewed that over, lips pursed. And what will people say? She demanded at last. When they see a fishwife from Fleabottom on a dragon's back, while they're still scratching in the dirt to pay their taxes? That the world has changed, Daenerys said. That dragons don't care whose great-great-grandfather stole which patch of land. That if the small folk dream, it need not always be about getting a lord's cast-off tunic and a loaf that isn't stale. They'll say it's favoritism, Elena said. That it's because I sit at your table now. Yes, Daenerys said. They will. Some, others will see a chance, not for themselves perhaps, but for their children. Elena looked out the narrow window. Rhaegal lay curled on the courtyard's cracked flagstones, one wing half spread. Sunlight turned the green of his scales to deep jade. If I die, Elena said, I'll come haunt you. You'll have to find room among all the rest, Daenerys said. The first time Elena climbed onto Rhaegal's back, the dragon turned his head to look at her with yellow eyes. He huffed, hot breath blowing her hair back. She smelled meat, ash, and something else. Cold stone in winter, like the inside of a cave. You sure this thing won't decide I'm lunch halfway up? She muttered. If he wanted to eat you, he'd have done it already, Daenerys said. Dragons are like that. They don't plot, they act. It's people you have to watch for bites. That's comforting, Elena grumbled. She swung a leg over, clumsy but determined. Rhaegal shifted, lowering himself so her weight settled along his spine. "Hold tight with your knees," Daenerys called. "Not with your hands. Hands are for steering. Knees are for living." "Nutty. That's the filthiest thing I've ever heard you say," Olenna shouted back. "Wait until you hear what the Dothraki say to their horses," Daenerys said. Rhaegal leapt. For a heartbeat he seemed to hang between ground and sky. Then his wings snapped wide, and the air caught them like a hand. They rose. Olenna's scream was lost in the wind. Later, when she stumbled back onto the courtyard stones, face flushed, hair wild, eyes blazing, she looked straight at Daenerys and said, "Again." Jon came south the next year. He arrived at Dragonstone without fanfare, wrapped in a cloak that had seen better winters, snow still clinging to his boots. Ghost trotted at his heel, fur thicker than before, eyes as watchful as ever. "Thought I'd find you buried under letters," he said by way of greeting, stepping into the great hall and glancing around at the table strewn with maps and scrolls. "I was," she said. "Tyrion dug me out. What brings you down from the land of sensible people and sensible coal?" He shrugged. "Thought it was time I saw your dragons when they were saving my life," he said. "And time I saw what this new world of yours looks like when it's not buried in snow and dead men." She studied him. There were more gray strands in his hair, threaded through the black, lines at the corners of his eyes that had not been there when they'd stood in the godswood together. He moved with a soldier's economy, but there was less of the constant flinch in him, less of the coiled tension that had looked for ice in every breath. "You're thinner," she said. "You're not," he said, then flushed. "I mean, you look well fed. That's good, for a queen." She laughed. "You never were much good with words," she said. "That's your job," he said. They walked the parapets together. Below, waves smashed against black stone. Above, Drogon cruised lazily, a dark crescent against the washed-out sky. On another part of the island, Rhaegal practiced tight turns with Olenna on his back, her whoops of exhilaration faint but unmistakable in the air. Viserion slept curled like a cat around one of the outer towers. "You're letting others ride," Jon observed, following Rhaegal's swoop with his eye. "It was that, or let the realm believe dragons served only me," she said. "If they belong to more than one hand, they belong more to the world than to the crown. That's the hope." "World might still fear them," Jon said. "World should," she said. "A little. Fear keeps men from stupid rebellions. Too much, and they begin to whisper my father's name and mine. I walk between." "You always did," he said. They paused where the parapet bulged, forming a little half-tower that jutted over the sea. "Sometimes I dream of other paths," he said quietly. "Of standing in a different hall. Of doing different things." She looked at him sidelong. "Other halls," she said. "Other things. Like what?" He shook his head, jaw tight. "Killing you," he said. "That. I've had that dream since Bran started talking about what might have been. His hands clenched on the stone of the parapet. I know I didn't. I know I wouldn't. But sometimes I wake with the feel of a hilt in my hands and my blood on them," she finished. He looked miserable. "I'm sorry," he said. "I shouldn't have said." "I saw it too," she said softly. "In Garth. In the house. I saw your face above me. I saw the knife. I saw King's Landing burning under Drogon's shadow while bells rang, and no one heard them because my own head was full of fire. I saw you do what men thought was mercy, or justice, or necessity. Nani, ka." He stared at her, breathing shallow. "And yet," she went on, "here we are. You didn't. We chose differently. Dreaming a thing is not doing it, Jon. Worry when you stop being horrified." He huffed out a breath that might have been a laugh. "I'm always horrified," he said. "At myself. At everything. This world. It's a mess. And yet, she said again, and yet there are children in Wintertown who've never seen a White Walker, he said slowly, who think stories of the long night are something old people used to scare them into coming home before dark. That's something. It is, she said. And in the free folks' villages, men who once raided and killed for a few extra sheep now trade for them, he said. Grumble about taxes like proper Westermen. That's something too. You sound like a man who's seen that open ground Bran talked about, she said. No more fixed paths. It's terrifying, he said. It's freedom, she said. Those two danced together. He watched Rhaegal and Olenna loop, then roll in the sky. Think he'd let me on? He asked. Rhaegal? She said. He might. He's gotten used to one stubborn fool on his back. Another wouldn't hurt him. I meant Drogon, he said. She looked up. Drogon wheeled above them, black against light, huge and beautiful and terrible. He had grown since Jon had last seen him, his wingspan stretching from one end of the courtyard to the other when he landed. His roar shook the stones. He might throw you off, she said. He might not. I can't promise. Nothing worth doing is safe, Jon said. You taught me that. She raised an eyebrow. I thought the dead did, she said. He smiled crookedly. Maybe both, he said. In the end, Drogon did not throw him. He lowered himself at Daenerys' whistle, grumbling. His eye rolled when Jon approached, but he did not snap. Remember, she said, watching as Jon climbed. Knees, not just hands. He grunted something that might have been assent. They rose together, up past the cliffs, past the gulls, past the point where Dragonstow's towers were little black teeth in the sea. The wind tore Jon's cloak back. His hair whipped. He whooped once, a raw, boyish sound torn from somewhere under all that solemnity. From the parapet, Daenerys watched them go. She thought of doors again. In one, she had flown alone, believing herself singular. In another, she had flown with a lover who would be her end. In this, she watched someone she trusted ride beside her dragons, and felt something in her chest unclench. The realm did not turn overnight into the thing she had imagined as a girl, staring at faded tapestries in a Braavosi house, and listening to her brother's rants about the people who had stolen their realm. It did not turn into the shining dream of the House of the Undying either. It turned into something messier. In the north, the Starks rebuilt their halls and their sense of themselves. Bran ruled from his wheeled chair, seeing more through Raven's eyes than through his own. Sansa guided him, her letters to Daenerys as sharp and thoughtful as the glances she'd favored her with across the dragon pit. Arya vanished one day on a small ship, heading west with a grin, a bag of coin, and a list of names in her pocket that had more question marks than before. In the Riverlands, Edmure Tully tried to be useful and mostly succeeded. He made mistakes. Daenerys heard of them. She did not burn him for them. Grain flowed again from those fields. In the Iron Islands, Yara fought 3 small rebellions and outlived them all. Once she asked Daenerys for help putting down a particularly nasty splinter group that had taken to burning both ships and the people inside. Daenerys flew, burned a ship in demonstration, and left Yara to handle the rest. Yara's men complained that their queen had invited a foreign dragon to their waters. Yara told them to build better ships and better gods. In Dorne, Arianne Martell took up her father's seat when Doran's gout finally took him. She ruled with a mix of caution and heat, her letters to Daenerys full of schemes for trade and sniping comments about the colder lords of the mainland. Trystane wrote from the north of snow and strange food, and the way Stark eyes softened when he spoke of suns and sands. In King's Landing, the rebuilt dragon pit became a hall not just for councils and shouting matches, but for plays. A troupe from Braavos came and performed a comedy about a dragon who wanted to be a baker. The small folk laughed. The lords pretended not to. Once, Olenna took Rhaegal down low over Flea Bottom and had him blow a narrow stream of flame into a bakery oven that had gone cold. The baker nearly fainted. Children followed the dragon through the lanes for days, trying to touch his tail. Daenerys spent more time on the road than on any one throne. She visited Winterfell in deep winter and sat under the heart tree, the snow settling in her hair, while Bran spoke of old kings and older gods. She went to the Reach and walked through fields of golden wheat, listening to farmers tell her how the old lords had cheated them and how the new ones tried. She sat in the Vale and watched hawks wheel below the Erie's mountain, the air thin in her lungs. Everywhere she went, she listened. "There are too many causes," Tyrion grumbled once after a long day of hearing petitions that ranged from, "My neighbor's pig keeps eating my cabbages," to, "The taxman stole my daughter. You can't fix them all." "No," she said, "but I can choose which ones I put my weight behind. That's all a queen is. A thumb on the scales." "Nade, anda." "And what if your thumb grows heavy?" he asked. "Then you'll call me on it," she said, loudly, "and Olenna will shout, and Sansa will write angry letters, and Davos will look disappointed, and somewhere in the north Jon will feel a chill without knowing why." "Not the dragons?" he asked. "The dragons will love me either way," she said. "That's the danger." Years later, when she dreamed, the Hall of Doors came to her only once more. She stood in it as she had in Korth, the blue bricks slick with some sweet, sticky moisture, the air thick with the smell of shade of the evening. Doors lined the walls, some plain, some carved with sigils she recognized. The red three-headed dragon of her house, the great direwolf of Stark, the lion, the kraken, the stag, the sun and spear. Most of them were closed. Light seeped under a few. From others, only darkness. She walked along them, fingers trailing over wood. Here, behind one, she felt the thrum of a life she might have had. A quiet house, a husband with gentle hands, children underfoot, no crown heavier than the one in her hair on holy days. Behind another, the sharp, intoxicating heat of conquest. Armies at her back, cities burning front and center, her name shouted in fear and worship both. She passed them by. At the end of the hall, where once there had been an infinite receding perspective, she found only a wall of smooth, pale stone. No door. No crack. Nothing. She laughed. "So this is what you are now," she said to whatever part of herself listened here. "A room with no exits, or an open field, or a window with no glass. Take your pick." When she woke, the morning light in her chamber was soft and full. Rhaegal's rumble vibrated faintly through the walls, a distant purr of contentment. Somewhere below, Olenna was shouting at a mason about the angle of a new drainage channel. Tyrion was probably arguing with a scribe about the wording of some particularly contentious clause. Jon, somewhere in the north, might be walking a line between villages, counting heads, making sure the living still had more than the dead. She rolled onto her side and looked out the window. The sky was wide and empty for once. No dragons, no omens, just clouds. She smiled. Then she rose, dressed, and went to see which small, stubborn piece of the world needed her attention today.